audience, and welcome back to our two-parter this week, where we are going to be taking you on another exciting journey here at the Arcane Archive. Sammy,
yeah,
what are we talking about today? We gave a little bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Preview of it in our last video. This one's coming directly after it. We might even post this as a two-parter in the same week, depending, because you know they go so well together.
we're talking about the lawful counterparts to the horrid creatures from the abyss, the devils today.
That's right. It's devil talk today, you guys.
Which, as much as I love the abyss and the wonderful things that happen there, the nine hells and the devils that reside within are a very fun group of creatures.
Oh, they are so very charismatic and charming in their own personal way. Like we love our demons, as we kind of said last time. Like they're so badass and so cool in a very specific kind of way. And devils are no less interesting and like charming in their own aspects, and yet ironically they are, while similar in a multitude of ways, especially physically, their personalities are, I wouldn't necessarily say polar opposite, ironically, but
they're definitely a counterpart. I think
they're a counterpart, and they are almost two sides of the same coin, obviously, in that way, where they're just like devils and demons. They both have like sneaky, conniving, cunning machinations for the grand cosmic order and you know, outfit, so to speak. But how they go about doing it is intrinsically different. And that is one of the biggest things that me and Sam wanted to specifically highlight and touch upon in both the demon and now the devil episode specifically, is how these two different creatures or beings specifically go about exerting their goals and ambitions, because they're both wholly evil, obviously, is kind of their whole shtick. But as we said before, I believe in the demon episode, one side is intrinsically tied to the chaotic alignment, while the other intrinsically tied to the lawful alignment. And that, again, shines through in their behavior and mannerisms and how they conduct themselves in the multiverse. But that being the case, once more, at the top of these videos, we're kind of just getting into the habit of it now. If you like what we're doing here at the Arcane Archive, please be sure to like the video, comment on any thoughts or things that you guys want, either about, you know, topics you'd love us to discuss, or any thoughts and stuff about the channel and the show itself. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it if you could. It would always be highly appreciated, as always. Thank you guys so much. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on in. MetaTalks. Devils. Devils personify tyranny, with a totalitarian society dedicated to the domination of mortal life. Now, even with that one sentence right there, showcases a distinct difference between demons and devils. With demons, we talked about before, they are the personification of destruction, right? They are essentially the extensions of the abyss, the plane of existence known as the abyss itself, seeking to spread and, in a sense, I guess, dominate, but also more so destroy, wipe out, so that it can replace everything with itself, right? Whereas devils specifically want to dominate and enslave and control everything else kind of as it is, you know, like, or they can be. They're cool with making you devils because it also makes it easier to control you. But they're also much more about doing it. They don't want to destroy if they don't have to. They're not about destruction and overt death and stuff. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're more so about conniving, manipulation, entrapping, corrupting you from you doing it yourself, rather than them forcing you or, like, you know, destroying you, claiming your soul to then morph it and corrupt it and change it into a, you know, a form that serves the purposes of like their lair, they're more like, hey, we'll give you all of this stuff. We'll make some deals with you to give you power or any kind of like, you know, temptation and stuff that you might be looking for. In return, you just have to kind of do this thing for us. And we get this, you get that, and everybody's happy, right? Until eventually you realize that the devil has slipped in like a little clause in the contract that makes it so that you are now beholden in this way or that way. You need to do this thing until eventually you become an even more evil or darker version of yourself, if you were at all. You may have been a benevolent person and a good person who was put in a position where like, hey, I have to do something. I'm terrified or I'm scared or I'm desperate and I need something to help me. And a devil at that point that's the perfect time for them to swoop in when you're at your most desperate and weakest point. And they will usually take full advantage and offer you a deal like, hey, I can give you power, or I can give you this, or I can give you what you need in return for this thing. I think many people who have played Baldur's Gate 3, for instance, I think they did a phenomenal job of showcasing how devils behave and act in that game. I mean, it was so amazing to see and witness that in like real time in like the game, where you would see how these devils would interact with your party, your friends, and other people. And it's like that is peak devil behavior right there. We didn't really get to see a lot of demons in Baldur's Gate 3, which is a little unfortunate, but I felt like they weren't necessarily as conducive to the environment of what the story was really trying to be and what story they were trying to tell. So that's okay. Maybe we'll get something in another game, Baldur's Gate 4 or something. But continuing on, the shadow of the nine hells of Baator, that's what the nine hells are called. Like the actual name of the nine hells is Baator. Extends far across the multiverse, and Asmodeus, the Dark Lord of Nesus, strives to subjugate the cosmos to satisfy his thirst for power. To do so, he must continually expand his infernal army, sending his servants to the mortal realm to corrupt the souls from which new devils are spawned. So right there, it does also specifically say, like, Asmodeus specifically is hoping to eventually corrupt all mortal souls to turn them all into devils, for which then he has full control and dominion over. So in a sense, it's kind of similar to the Abyss almost, in that he's also looking to kind of spread his own personal brand, I guess, of fiendishness. But it's also, again, more so in a very rigid, structured thing. He does it because he believes legitimately that he has the power and the ability and the right to make the world, the omniverse, as the best it can possibly be, right? He believes himself to be in like the most infallible, capable, like rightful heir to dominating everything, and that in his hands, he could make everything a veritable paradise, and you know, it would be the perfect thing. Obviously, he's a little full of it, you know. Like, to be fair, he is quite capable and incredible and exceedingly intelligent, beyond the likes of which almost any being can really say.
I mean, he's been pretty successful, all things considered.
I mean, in certain ways, you know, he initially fell from the heavens, to be fair, or at least that's one particular rendition. There's actually another, probably more accurate, but a more accurate backstory or origin story. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Continuing on. Devils are considered to be lords of tyranny. They live to conquer, enslave, and oppress. Once again, another very distinct difference between demons. Demons do like to conquer and enslave and oppress, but not as much in that way. Again, they usually are more about destruction and chaos and death and killing, rather than true, like, enslavement or oppression. Like they can do that, but it's also they're too prone to just wanton fits of destruction and stuff like that. So they don't really actively conquer or enslave or oppress for the vast majority of them. However, devils take perverse delight in exercising authority over the weak, and any creature that defies the authority of a devil faces swift and cruel punishment. Every interaction is an opportunity for a devil to display its power, and all devils have a keen understanding of how to use and abuse their power. In this sense, they're also referring to it almost in an actual literal sense of the fact that devils do have a strict hierarchy system, in that anytime any soul, whether it was mortal or wherever, becomes a devil at any point, you are fit into a strict, specific hierarchical system in there. We're going to get into the more specifics of that a little bit later, but suffice it to say is that wherever you are on the literal totem pole of devil society, you are then beholden to any devil that would technically rank higher than you. Like if they give you an order or a command, you are almost compelled to follow it. Not necessarily even just because you can't resist. Like you could resist unless they literally exerted their control over you, or their rather superior power, I should say. But you also are encouraged almost to obey, because you also get rewarded for that. Like if you obey the commands of your direct superior, that is a clear and most direct means of potentially getting you, like almost like you're in an office, right? Where like that is the best way and one of the most surefire ways to at least grant you more possibility of promotion. It's literally called promotion and demotion in devil society, where you can like increase your power and you transform or can be transformed into a more powerful devil through the process called promotion. But continuing, devils understand the failings that plague intelligent mortals, and they use that knowledge to lead mortals into temptation and darkness, as we said before, turning creatures into slaves to their own corruption. Devils on the material plane use their influence to manipulate humanoid rulers, whispering evil thoughts, fomenting paranoia, and eventually driving them to tyrannical action. They seek to corrupt the soul, right? The mortal soul, in order to literally claim it for the 9 hells so that it can be transformed into more devils, which then leads to, they can control things more. I will say also that devils have a particular preference, I would say, proclivity for benevolent souls, right? They'll take evil souls, but evil souls are easy, right? They don't get nearly as much value or clout for corrupting and taking or claiming an evil soul to the 9 hells, because that's just easy. But if a devil can literally take what was considered to be benevolent or good-souled person, corrupt them to their worst place, have them commit all kinds of sins, debauchery, atrocities, and then claim their soul, that is far more valuable and will net them way more like points and value and clout with the devil hierarchy or society, and will give them way and will propel them far faster to promotion than anything else, right? That's why so many devils are so, forgive the pun, hell-bent on forging as many contracts as they can with mortals, and doing so ideally with more benevolent or good-aligned creatures to then inevitably corrupt them and claim them for Baator. As we kind of were saying before, continuing, in accordance with their lawful alignment, devils obey even when they either envy or even outright dislike their superiors, because they know that their obedience will be rewarded. The hierarchy of the 9 hells depends on this unswerving loyalty, without which that fiendish plane would become as anarchic as the abyss. That, for anybody that might not understand, basically as chaotic as the abyss. Like, Baator specifically relies on it. It is absolutely vital that they maintain that level of unwavering loyalty and, to a certain extent, trust, even though, to be fair, any devil worth their salt, like a demon, this is one of the few ways that they're similar or the same. Any devil worth their salt is always scheming and conniving and has machinations to backstab and overthrow their direct superior devil. Like, they will 100% betray them if they see or sense a potential opportunity to rise in the ranks above them, right? Like, even specifically, like, the absolute supreme lord of the hells, Asmodeus himself, everyone is trying to get that seat, right? Heavy is the head who wears the crown. Asmodeus has no real allies, exactly because, one, he's the literal lord of tyranny. He treats all of them horribly, horrendously, but he knows, and he does that specifically in order to keep them in line, because he knows exactly that, like, they are all, regardless of how they might appear to be and how they might, like, wax poetic about his amazingness and how loyal they are to him, he knows for a fact that they are all scheming behind his back to eventually take his crown if they could. And some have tried multiple times. Some have tried, and none have succeeded up to this point. So, but that being the case, as it says, at the same time, it is in the nature of devils to scheme, creating in some a desire to rule that eclipses their contentment to be ruled. This singular ambition is strongest amongst the archdevils, whom Asmodeus appoints to rule the 9 layers of the 9 hells. These high-ranking fiends, the archdevils, are the only devils to ever sample true power, which they crave like the sweetest ambrosia. Again, we already kind of talked about, basically, a devil's primary desire is to always seek out to create more contracts, more opportunities to consign souls, mortal souls, to Baator in order for they themselves to also rise in the ranks and gain more favor and more power. They love to strike bargains with mortals, seeking to gain some benefit or prize, but a mortal making such a bargain must be wary. Devils are crafty negotiators and positively ruthless at enforcing the terms of the agreement. Moreover, a contract with even the lowliest devil is enforced by Asmodeus's will. That is something highly important to take in, like, for GMs out there. Like, this is why making a contract with any devil of any power is exceedingly dangerous and tumultuous, okay? Because it doesn't matter, as it's essentially akin to, if you make a deal with any devil, you are almost essentially making a deal with Asmodeus himself to a certain extent, because his power and will still enforces any contract, any clause or agreements that were made to remain as they are for both sides. This can go both ways, of course. The devil, however, is far and away usually way more talented and capable of understanding exactly all the little specific, like, small details in a contract, right? How many of us in real life, you see like a so-called, like, we have an agreement disclosure for, like, the new update of Apple, and we're like, yeah, we don't want to read through all of this stuff. Like, that's just like, who reads through all the fine print of a contract? Devils take exact specific advantage of that type of thinking, where they will slip in, like, they will present like a huge, and they really will, it'll be a literal contract that they can conjure themselves, and they will be like, it's all there in writing, and you can read the full thing to your heart's content right now before signing. But who would do that? And even if they did, very few people are necessarily smart enough to be able to see, point out, and address those small little details and clauses that the devils will sneak in there.
It's the littlest things, you know, and it's like one of those people that do make contracts with devils and do so in a way that's beneficial to themselves. It's a very difficult thing to do without making mistakes.
So
And I mean, once you start doing it, especially if you somehow end up getting the good side of those bargains,
or at least seemingly.
I mean, Asmodeus is paying attention. So like there's, you know, it's not just the devil you're making the contract with that now knows about you. There's many of them that are going to know about you because they connive, they scheme, they talk to each other. This is not like the Abyss where that's one entity you're dealing with. There are other entities around it, but they're not going to work together unless someone forces them to. These devils, I mean, you'll oftentimes have instances where a couple maybe not so powerful ones work together to usurp someone more powerful or to gain favor at a rate that's not normal. And so like you have to be aware, even the smallest insignificant contract in your eyes or your player's eyes can cause a lot of issues,
astronomical consequences down the line if they are not careful. And like Sam said, the difference between devils and demons there is like devils are just so way more organized, and that organizational skill. Here's I guess another thing that I should point out on that same vein is that devils are also far less prolific than demons, right? We talked about in the demon episode, probably the demon's most powerful aspect is their innumerable hordes and numbers of them, right? Demons are literally like incalculable amounts of just constant, overwhelming numbers. Devils are not the same. Devils, they have a very strict, finite amount of them a lot of the time at times. Like they are trying to add more, hence the whole overwhelming desire to, again, corrupt souls and claim them for Baator to turn them into more devils to add to their ranks. But they are nowhere near as prolific as demons are. And yet, they are still capable of holding their own in the blood war against the overwhelming numbers of demons. And this is widely known to be because devils are intrinsically just more powerful than the average demon, right? The average devil is usually stronger than the average demon because of exactly how Asmodeus chooses to delegate power to all of them, right? It's very strict. And that's, again, why they are also intrinsically tied to the lawful alignment. The amount of energy and power that Asmodeus can provide and give to all the devils under his command is naturally stronger than the demons who are just like, hey, we're all individuals, we're all doing this thing, and a lot of us don't really listen unless we absolutely have to. But because all devils are literally tied directly to Asmodeus, he has literal control over any and all devils at any point. They also share a little bit of that power, and therefore their innate strength is higher than that of like a demon's. And that is what keeps them essentially at a stalemate with the demons in the blood war, because it allows them, even though they don't have as many, their devils can still contend with a multitude and a myriad of the demons that show up. Mm-hmm. But continuing on, any mortal creature that breaks such a contract that is made with a devil instantly forfeits its soul and is spirited away to the nine hells. So that's obviously another thing for GMs to keep in mind for any players that straight up just break a contract with a devil. They could just be gone like that. To own a creature's soul is to have absolute control over that creature, and most devils accept no other currency in exchange for the fiendish power and boons they can provide. A soul is usually forfeited when a mortal dies naturally, for devils are immortal and can wait years for a contract to play out if they'd like. If a contract, however, allows a devil to claim a mortal soul before death, it can instantly return to the nine hells with the soul in its possession, and only divine intervention can release a soul after a devil has claimed it.
Which is, I mean, pretty insane.
Yeah. And again, you have to understand that because of the fact that they are so heavily aligned with the lawful side of like the spectrum, that also applies to everything and everyone that interacts with them, right? It is ironclad. There is no room for like, there is no wiggle room. There is no room for addendums or whatever, unless in very specific, rare circumstances or instances. And so anytime you deal with a devil, you have to be exceedingly careful about the actual stakes or the actual parts of the contract that you stipulate, because they might take it literally. Heck, they could potentially, if you don't clarify, they could take something you're offering in the spirit of what you're implying, right? It could be like, hey, you make an implication, and they will then add that as an actual stipulation of the contract. And then you're like, well, I didn't actually say this. Like, well, you implied it and you didn't say, you didn't clarify. And so you kind of left it up to me to be able to interpret it how I want. And so now you either have to go and fight that demon prince over there and defeat them, so as part of the, you know, conditions of the contract, or I get your soul right here and now. You know, it's things like that where you're just like, oh, well, I want the power to rule, you know, my kingdom. It's like, okay, well, then you have to do a favor for me. You have to defeat you know, a creature of my choosing. And then they'll choose a demon prince, and you'll be like, well, I can't do that. And you're like, well, then you would be in breach of the contract then, wouldn't you? And I would then get your soul. Yeah, they are pretty terrifying. But you know, at that point, and we can also, you know what, just as a quick aside, they also function very similar to demons in terms of the fact that devils also hold true names. It's just a pretty common staple of fiends that all fiends have true names to them. At least all fiends of true power, of a certain power level, have true names to them, even if they don't go by it. And if you are able to learn those true names, either from ancient scrolls or tomes or texts, you will basically have extra amounts of control and what's what I'm looking for? Influence over that fiend. Same is true for both devils and or demons. And that is a way that a lot of like practitioners of magic are able to summon more powerful demons and keep them under control, because they literally are able to like almost what would you say, Sam? Like it's not necessarily like they have to obey you. You don't have, it's not like necessarily like a dominate monster thing, but it's like,
I think the idea of a contract, the idea of the way it works, is it's supposed to be a mutually beneficial thing. There's obviously instances where, like, you know, charming a devil, stuff like that, it's not necessarily full obeying all the time. You know, there's the whole trick of, well, you summon a devil, charm it, so you force it to get its true name. At that point, obviously it'll do what you tell it to do, but even then, the whole time it's doing that, it's trying to find a way to undermine you,
to escape and get free. Yeah, because you can bind it. But
yeah, the reality is that while it will do what you tell it to do, if you aren't smart, it might weasel out of, you know, you have to be very careful with your words. It's a monkey's paw kind of situation where you have to be smart. You have to think ahead. You have to think of what, you know, what you can get away with, what it can get away with, what you're willing to let it get away with as well. If you're willing to kind of give them a short leash, maybe not keep it as taut, and they can actually do some stuff for themselves as well, that could either put you in hot water where they somehow get out of your deal, or it gives them the opportunity to do things for themselves that also puts things in their favor, in which they would most likely be more likely to work with you.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, while they are evil, they are structured. And so if they can gain something out of it, and it's not at too much of a detriment to themselves, that what you're asking them, odds are, if you both get something out of the deal, they will willingly do it. Now, how they choose to go about it and how you want them to go about it are two very different things.
Unless you specifically stipulate in very clear, no uncertain terms how you want them to do it, it's up to their interpretation.
You know, because you could say, oh, I want you to keep this orphan protected. Okay, well, there's nothing that stipulates I can't burn down the rest of the orphanage, you know, or there's nothing that you know, oh, you want me to you want me to find this person? Well, I'm going to kill everyone between me and them.
Yeah. Or it's like, if you want to protect the orphan, I'll take him to the 9 hells then in my personal thing. He'll be safe there. Like, yeah, they're
and
safe.
at the end of the day, nothing will happen to the kid except for extreme mental trauma, but you didn't specify. And I almost want to say that these things are very clear with the devils. I mean, I still, for the life of me, if you played Baldur's Gate 3, you know who I'm going to start talking about, which is Raphael. And he is, if not the best, one of the best instances of a Wizards of the Coast style devil in modern media. I mean, the charisma, he
is phenomenal.
And my favorite
thing is,
like,
him as a
it's
character.
not like, I mean, this dude is definitely like a greater devil.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
he has the power and the experience, the intelligence. He's been around for a bit.
He has enough magic to have his own little demiplane. He has enough to have all these artifacts and collections, and like knows all of these things that he really has no business knowing. And it probably took him a very long time to get there. And so when you try to pull one over on him, or you don't follow through with him, he is very cross. And if this wasn't a game, if this was a story that, you could make any decision to that extent, he would kill you immediately.
He would be screwed him over. Well, that's the thing.
If you screw him over, he would ruin your life.
I was gonna say, he probably wouldn't even actually kill you. He would just destroy everything that you care about as best as he can. Like, he would cause you to suffer and suffer badly. And when
you finally die, he'll be right there.
He'll be ready to claim you in
Avernus, waiting for your soul. To then torture you for the rest of eternity after that. But I think it's a great, because, okay, how do I put this? Devils can be charming. It's not really like
kind of their whole thing, as a matter of fact.
It's not really like the demons, where you could think they're cool and powerful and great. Devils are legitimately, they're not like, what's the thing? What's better than the devil you know is the line that he uses. And that's true, because they are a powerful resource used by many magic practitioners, whether they're evil or not, whether they're part of a cult or not. Even to the baseline of having one as a familiar. They're not all, the same level of dangerous, but like they are powerful allies in the sense of power. But they are a valuable tool. And so his whole stipulation of like, I'm here, you might as well use what I have to offer. I mean, and he says it from the gun that I will help you, but expect to pay it back.
Oh yeah. I mean, he is always incredibly transparent with you. Like, hey, like the first time you meet him, he literally reveals himself as being a devil. You know, and not all devils will do that. No. There are plenty of devils that will deliberately like manipulate and trick you, and you won't even know at times that they are an actual devil. You'll just be like, oh, hey, until they finally be like, hey, I can offer you this contract. And in fact, to be fair, I think Raphael does do this a little bit as well, but plenty of devils will even deliberately manipulate events around you to force you into like the worst possible position, right? We talked about that before. Another great almost example of this is Will's patron. What was her name again?
Maverna? No.
Something like that. Malara? What? Hang on a minute. I need to Will's patron. Come on now. Just why won't you tell me who his patron is? Mizora, that's her name. Mizora.
Yeah.
Will's devil patron, Mizora. How, and again, this might be a little bit of spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3 for Will's story. But again, it's been out for a bit now. If you haven't kind of seen it at this point or whatever, like, it's not a huge spoiler, but if you want, skip ahead a couple of seconds, or just mute the video real quick. But essentially, Will got into a contract with Mizora specifically because his city, Baldur's Gate, was under siege and threat by apparently cultists of Tiamat. They were attempting to potentially summon Tiamat in some form or something to Baldur's Gate at that time. Now, I don't think that was actually true. I believe it was kind of hinted at or implied that Missoura specifically sent those cultists there and manipulated Will, because she's the one who beckoned him and told him to come out to check the area where these cultists were. Now, it either was actual machination of Tiamat and Missoura from basically Zariel's order wanted to undermine any of Tiamat's plans, because, you know, Zariel and Tiamat are kind of always at each other's throats like that, because they're both in Avernus and neither of them like each other. So it's either that Missoura specifically manipulated the event so that Will would be here, or even that she also was just like, hey, we want to undermine Tiamat's plans. And either way, though, you're currently screwed. Will didn't have the power to stop these cultists himself. He was literally placed in a position where he knew something bad was about to happen to the city he grew up in. He loved this place, and he didn't have the power to stop it himself. And that's when, miracle of miracles, Missoura shows up all benevolent, like, hey, little boy. Never mind the fact he's also like 17 or something at this point. His dad is currently away, like on a thing. So he is completely vulnerable right now, right? And she's like, I can offer you this power to defend your home, and all you have to do is just sign this little contract here. Don't worry about all the specific stuff about it. You don't have to worry about that. Right now, what you should be worried about is the fact that those people are about to summon a devil dragon of some sort or other things to destroy your home. So make a decision quickly. Probably. Quickly would be best. And as you would expect, he chose to make a contract with her without really looking things over. And to be fair, Will isn't really the smartest dude in the first place. He's kind of an idiot. he's a bit of a himbo, honestly, but that's kind of why we love him too. Because he's kind of he's a sweet but also dumb boy. He's a sweet dumb boy. But that was still, I love that. That was like one of the most amazing like displays of how a devil can truly operate. Is like they wait and they will watch until you are again at your most vulnerable and desperate and swoop in. And just like that is how they do it. And sometimes they themselves will be the ones to manipulate events to put you there. And you didn't even know. You wouldn't even know until they later just told you. They will literally, after they get you to sign the contract, they'll just be like, wonderful. Make it disappear. And it's like, all right, boys, we're done here. You're good. And like shoo off the so-called threat. And they'll be like, wait, what? And be like, yeah, no. It was all just a ruse. And you fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Which
is crazy to me.
And it's like, but that's literally what they even said in those passages, right? Is that devils have an almost like obsessive sick desire to lord their power and their influence over another being that they have, right? So they will absolutely like lord over you about it and pester you and poke you like, hey, guess what? I just screwed you over. I manipulated you and now you're mine and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, it is insane. Again, the roleplay potential is incredible for these creatures, and that's one of the reasons why we love them so much. I mean, again, if you guys aren't familiar, please look up Raphael and even Missoura to a certain extent. You love to hate these guys, but you also love them in a lot of other ways. Like, they're just so charismatic. They are buttery, silky smooth with it, and it's just like, oh, fantastic. God, you're horrible, and I love it. But you know what? That being the case, since we kind of talked a little about some individuals that are considered to be a little higher up, like Raphael would definitely be considered a greater devil. Not quite up there at like Duke or like Duchess or Archduke or Archduchess levels, but definitely at least greater for sure. Missoura a bit lower. I would say she's probably more of she's a lesser devil because technically she's a Cambion, I believe, actually, and so she's powerful still, but definitely I think on the lesser kind of thing. But let's go into the actual hierarchical structure of devils real quick, with that being the case. At the absolute bottom of the totem pole, whenever an evil soul is basically confined and corrupted to the 9 hells, it is known as what, Samuel?
Which part?
The absolute lowest ranked devil.
Oh, my favorites, the lemurs.
The lemurs, indeed.
They're so like, if you thought our friends from yesterday, the lowest ranked demons, were funny looking,
the mains, indeed. The mains are the great demons, the lemurs are devils.
These remind me of like if you took a person and then made them into a pink kind of melty fudgesicle. And they're just so sad because they're all like,
they're pathetic and unfortunate creatures.
Like, that's the funny thing. You know, the Abyss is this cutthroat world where like you just die, but like these things
or survive.
These things are like enslaved and treated like garbage. They're not even usually outright killed. They're
no. I mean, that's the thing with devils, is devils are not. They do not resort to killing and death if they can help it, because they prefer torture, suffering,
it's so good.
Domination, manipulation. Like, they don't, because they also are like that's a waste, right? To kill something, destroy, it's a waste. It can instead be used and put towards something productive and constructive. And so they don't destroy like demons do. But arguably it might even be worse. It might be better to just be straight up killed or destroyed rather than enslaved and endlessly tortured and debased. You know, lemurs are the lowest form of devil. They are twisted and tormented souls of evil and corrupted mortals. And a lemur killed in the 9 hells is only permanently destroyed if it is killed with a blessed weapon, or if its shapeless corpse is splashed with holy water before it can return to life. So that's even the other ridiculous thing, is usually any fiend that is destroyed in its home plane is gone forever. Except for lemurs, who you have to still kill them in a very specific way.
These poor creatures.
Or they'll just keep being, they can come back and be further used and abused.
Imagine that cyclical, terrible experience of like, finally I can die, and then you're like, you wake up and you're right back there again. You're like,
literally,
no.
It's like he literally, think of it almost like, you know, you get blasted with like an overwhelming heat ray, right? Flame, hellfire burns your body, and you're like, you experience just the untold amount of pain, but you're like, I can finally at least die. And then you wake up again, and he's like, you ready for round 2? And you just keep getting blasted. Like, imagine
it's just so
how horrendous that would be. But, you know, however, there are certain times where lemurs might have the smallest little chance of being promoted, mostly almost similar to how demons do it. When a devil has need of a specific desire, or like, you know, if they need to shore up their forces, if they lost a few, or if they need to just bolster themselves for some kind of operation. And in so doing, a lemur can be promoted to the ranks of lesser devils. Now, lesser devils are probably the most abundant of all devils. Like, the lesser devil ranks, they have the most amount. They still technically have a bit of a hierarchical system that's like, this devil, even though it's considered lesser, is still stronger than this other lesser devil. But they usually include a myriad of devils, including imps, chain devils, spine devils, bearded devils, barb devils, and bone devils. These guys vary wildly in shape, appearance, and abilities. But all of them are still pretty powerful in their own right.
See, there you go.
That's, above them now, should any of them prove to be particularly competent or intelligent or capable, talented, they can then be elevated or promoted to the rank of greater devils, which, as we said before, Mizora, who is Will's patron, is most likely falls under the same thing of either a lesser devil, perhaps maybe at like the bottom end of greater devil. I'm not entirely sure. She never comes across as being particularly like powerful, but just very smart and conniving. So, but that being the case, Raphael is absolutely at least a greater devil, and a greater devil of some repute and power. Greater devils include the likes of Erinyes, horn devils, ice devils, and usually at the pinnacle of greater devil power, pit fiends. Pit fiends are they are the epitome of greater devil. They are often even sometimes high enough to be considered dukes or duchesses of hell at times. Because they truly are kind of the cream of the crop. There are only ever what do I want to say? Like, I think there are only ever like 666 pit fiends at a time.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Like they specifically are. They're a finite amount. Like there can never be more or like less, I think, than like 666 pit fiends.
Unfortunately, it doesn't say. But yeah, I mean,
pit fiends are there. Hang on there. Let me just look it up here. How many pit fiends are there? Yeah, I think it's supposed to be like, you know, the whole 666 thing where it's like, you know, 666 pit fiends. There aren't any more than that. Because some archdukes or archdevils rather, they have like a number of pit fiends under their control, while others have, you know, every archduke has at least some amount of pit fiends under them. There are currently there's still a bit of a debate exactly how many pit fiends there truly are. But suffice it to say is pit fiends are literally one step below most of the time archdukes or like any archdevils. But that being the case, at that point, we can absolutely get to the absolute pinnacle of the nine hells, of devil kind itself. Those specifically being the archdevils. Now, archdevils usually include, you know, dukes or duchesses, as well as archdukes or archduchesses. Currently, I mean, and there are... We say that because there's a difference between a duke and an archduke, specifically because, like, you can still be considered an archdevil, but you are not the true archduke. Like, an archduke is the actual ruler of that layer of the nine hells. But you can also still have an archdevil, which would be lowered to a duke, right? So they're under the archduke, but they're still considered to be an archdevil because they are so powerful and they are their own completely original being at that point, right?
I mean, there's going to be ones that don't fall into the category of like, it's an ice devil, it's a pit fiend, it's an Enra, and I think Mizora is a good answer of that, or a good example of that, considering she directly serves Zariel. So
she does. Well, she's considered a Cambion specifically.
Yeah, which
so again, that's like they're like technically they're like they're the offspring. Yeah. Well, they're almost similar to succubi and incubi and Erinyes for that matter. Where they are not really part of anything. Like they are both, and there are both infernal and demonic Cambions, because they're literally just the half-breed offspring of a mortal and a fiend. So it's like she's a little bit different and out of the normal hierarchy in that way.
For the sake of but she's powerful enough that she is directly serving
Zariel. Yes, Zariel. That is true.
So most likely is as powerful as any, you know,
she might lesser. She could potentially be in the greater devils. I hesitate to
lower
say that
end.
Again. Yeah, but I would say like she's at the very least upper end lesser devil, lower end greater devil, because again, like she never shows a lot of power or like strength, especially since there are certain things that happen in the story that like showcase her as probably not being super powerful herself, but she's still strong enough to provide power to Will as his patron, as well as the fact that she also does answer directly to Zariel, but she could just be more so along the lines of like, she's just a really great like information gatherer or like whatever. She might not be explicitly powerful, but she might be particularly useful is what it could be.
What I say is, when I see something like that and I look at Cambion in the monster manual, or that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at something that's obviously a little bit more than that. But that's that's why I like devils, is because you can take a bone devil, you can take a bearded devil or a spine devil, and you can make it way more powerful. Give it other things,
you could bolster it.
It doesn't necessarily need to be transformed to be considered more powerful. Now, you can just go that route, like Pokemon, like we did the other day with the demons, but you don't have to, because a lot of these things, they have baseline abilities and backgrounds that can be easily pushed up and down the hierarchical scale. You know, the idea of a disgraced pit fiend is awesome. It's withered, it's, you know, but it's still terrifying, because if you piss it off, it'll kill you, but it doesn't have the same oomph as it did when it was, you know, destroying people on a regular basis. It's a great, you know, again, this is why we like the
differences between them is really cool. But specifically, let's talk about the cream of the crop, the true peak bit of which are archdevils specifically. There are, how many archdevils would there be? I'm can't remember exactly all of them off the top of my head, but
there's a list of them here.
We do have a list of layers and lords, but it might not also encompass all of them either. But we can we can specifically go by layer too, and then talk about like ones that we kind of know are kind of the inhabitants, the archdevil inhabitants of that layer. For the first layer of Baator, the 9 hells, we have Avernus, and this is the layer that probably most people have heard about. Whether you remember the module called Descent into Avernus, literally, if you played Baldur's Gate 3, they reference Avernus all the time, constantly.
You were there at one point.
Yeah, you literally were there at one point. You started the game literally in Avernus. And that particular layer of the 9 hells is governed and ruled by the Archduchess Zariel. She's like she is a fallen angel, very similar to Asmodeus himself, or at least, again, one particular origin of Asmodeus. But now she is corrupted into a true archdevil of utmost rage and warmongering. She has like a long spiked flail for an arm and a flaming crown that used to be her halo. It's now like a flaming, like fiery hellfire crown. She's terrifying, but super cool too, bro. Love her. Other archdevil denizens of Avernus, the first layer, would also be the previous Archduke, Bel. And I believe he's like, he and Zariel like don't get along great, but he still, as always, because she was appointed by Asmodeus himself, he listens to her and pretends to cater to her and the thing.
Well, yeah, there's also forced to by Asmodeus. Like that was part of the, you know,
he was like, as a lot of people like believe it, Asmodeus did this specifically to keep Bel in check, because he was beginning to be a little bit too smart, conniving, and you know, threatening for his own good. And so he literally like corrupted Zariel, was like, oh hey Bel, you're gonna take a step back right now, and we're gonna put Zariel here. She's gonna be what we really need in order, because you also have to remember Avernus is the current battlefield primarily where the blood war takes place. And so he wanted Zariel and Bel to keep each other in check. Asmodeus does this a lot, where he literally will pit multiple of his archdevils against one another.
Perfect devil activity
to keep them from rising too much or becoming too much of a problem for him, right?
Yeah.
Because they, at the end of the day, every archdevil would absolutely love if they had the opportunity to take Asmodeus out, usurp him, and become the new supreme ruler of the 9 hells. Why wouldn't they, right? So one of good old big boy Asmo's tried and true methods is he just makes them all kind of paranoid and angry at each other to keep them kind of in a bit of infighting. But he always makes sure, again, that when he says, hey, start getting your shit done, they get their shit done, right? They have to listen to him. He has complete control over them. Yeah. Another ruler or another archdevil / something else in the first layer of hell, Avernus, would also be Tiamat, the dragon queen. She is also residing there. As essentially she made a deal with Asmodeus a long time ago, because she used to be just a goddess, right? Tiamat used to be, I believe, at one point, I thought she and Bahamut were greater deities at one point, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah, so this was during the era of dragons, like when dragons were the primary being.
You're right. Yeah,
which is, it's funny. Her fall kind of constitutes where she's ended up now.
It's very long. It was a very long way. Like she ended up. What's really unfortunate is she was so powerful at one point, but then a lot of the time she ended up just falling more and more until eventually, like, Bane ended up being able to like entrap her at one point. Yeah. And then she got free of Bane, but then in order doing so, she had to make a deal with Asmodeus, which now put her directly under him. And now he has her literally trapped in the 9 hells on the first plane of Avernus, basically doing his bidding to help contribute to the blood war.
Which is crazy because she does have her own domain in Avernus. Like she has her own space.
Yep.
They do not mesh.
They don't mess with each other for the most part.
But keep in mind as well, she is trapped there. She can't leave. She can't leave. So unless someone on the outside helps her remove herself, it is very much it's not out of the ordinary in the first layer of the hells to find like red dragons and things of that nature in her area, because it is slowly being changed by her presence there.
Yep.
Which is some people would say at this point she would be some form of infernal.
She is. She's considered to be a devil, like similar to how Lolth is considered a demon prince and a goddess. She's considered to be a archdevil and goddess.
Yeah, albeit obviously dragon is the main.
Technically,
thing.
Asmodeus would be too. Like,
yeah, I mean it's hard when you start counting all of them as deities. I don't think Tiamat is first looked at as a god anymore. Is more of just a force of terror in nature. But
is like she's still considered to be the goddess of chromatic dragons.
Yeah,
like that's what people do connect her with first and foremost. A lot of people don't even necessarily realize that she's stuck in Avernus. Actually, that's the funniest part. Is it's like a lot of people are like, yo, where is Tiamat? And it's like, oh yeah, no, she's stuck in the first layer of hell.
And she's been there for a very long time.
Long time at this point.
I think the coolest bit is only her and the Lords of the Nine know the contract. So
not even the Lords, it's just her and Asmodeus.
No, it's both.
Oh,
the Lords of the Nine know, yeah. They all know the contract as well. Because that's the checks and balances.
Yeah.
Asmodeus is like, well, here's our agreement. So
yeah,
check her, because that's the reality is she is still very powerful. And I find it funny that he has her stationed on the first layer. Obviously it makes sense to use her as a weapon.
Yeah,
but it's
for the
one of those things.
Too.
And not only is she in frontline territory, but also closest to the material plane in a meaning, in a sense.
It's almost. It's almost an FU to her, where she's just like, "Hey, look, you're almost
right over there.
It's right there. Oh, don't you want to go through? You can't. Oh, you can't. Oh, yeah. No, good girl. Stay where you are." And it's just like, and Asmo would do some shit like that. He would be a total dick like that because he is. Yeah. He would be a total dick like that. But those are essentially the 3 archdevils that inhabit the first layer of the 9 hells, Avernus. For the second layer, it's actually kind of usually just one. It's the second layer of before we move on, let's talk a little bit about the first layer of Avernus. Avernus please regale us, Sam, about a bit the layer of Avernus.
You get there. You appear there, whether it's through a plane shift spell or a terrible portal that you shouldn't have gone through in the first place. And you come out to a rocky wasteland. With rivers of blood and clouds of flies and just fiery rocks falling from the sky.
The river Styx, I believe, also makes an appearance in Avernus. Yes,
is that there,
or is that
in
only in
layer?
Stygia? I mean, I believe a river Styx goes through a couple of them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's by default on Avernus. I know it can also move around.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's one through Stygia, I know that, but I thought it also, the river Styx, I believe, also, it also goes through Avernus as well.
So I mean, as this is the primary battlefield for the Blood War. I mean, there are just large battlefields with, you know, bones and weapons and corpses that, you know, wouldn't have maybe gone back to where they came from similarly. All complete with a wonderfully giant tower made out of basalt where Zariel resides. Yep. You know, covered in the corpses of guests. And
I was gonna say, when she's not out completely wrecking the battlefield,
it's wonderful. Imagine walking up into a tower where the stairs on the way up are, you know,
littered with the corpses and skeletons and items and shit of fallen
incinerated guests
and other things.
Of all flavors, because that's kind of the cool part about having your own layer of hell, is that you can have a lot of different guests. But yeah,
especially the first layer, which is the most traveled through. Specifically,
I would say, I think Avernus is, you know, it's a very quintessential hell. You know, it looks kind of what you would expect hell to look like, aside from the molten pools of lava everywhere, which would be more common the closer you get to Tiamat, of course, but would be present throughout as well. So it's really a quintessential, like, hey, look at this. It's like, it's hell. It looks like hell. It's going to feel like hell.
And primarily, most of the native inhabitants, devils, would encompass Arinyas, imps, and spine devils. That, those would be the most devils that you would see on that particular layer of the 9 hells. Not as we'll kind of showcase, not all devils necessarily always inhabit every single layer as prolific as others. But that, in essence, is kind of the first layer of the 9 hells that you can kind of get through. The second layer of the 9 hells, which is known as Dis, and it is ruled by the Archduke Baator. Now, Baator is how to best describe Baator.
He's a fun one.
He's an interesting chap.
He's a really cool guy.
He's the Lord of Disc and an archdevil whose extreme vigilance almost personified caution. He is known as the Urbane Iron Duke, and he ruled from the Iron City within his Iron Tower. He is a person who is rather paranoid, to say the least. He is a master strategist and an expert in intrigue. He had a well-earned reputation for being the most carefully calculating of all the archdevils. His personal safety was always his top priority, and to catch him off guard would be to outwit one of the most clever and resourceful beings in reality. During every step of his dominion, he acted with patience, cunning, and unshakable discretion. And although he, like the other archdevils, schemed to take over the 9 hells, he avoided taking big risks, not out of cowardice or insecurity, but because of his unique view of the system. Baator, and let me also just go ahead and see, do we have a stat block for him? I don't know if we do.
I have no idea.
I don't think we have a stat block for Baator. No, we don't. I was going to say, I think the only one we might have is just Zariel. At least for 5e anyway. Yeah, I think for 5e, the only Archduke we would have is Zariel, right? Oh, no. I was gonna say, I guess another one we technically would have would be Baal, but perhaps before we move on, we should also talk about Baal. Baal is one of Zariel's commanders as well, in Avernus, part of the Blood War. He is a duke, so he is also. Oh no, I'm sorry. He is Mammon's vassal, but he specifically fights on Avernus in the Blood War. So we can talk about him a bit more when we get to Mammon. Then I think makes more sense. I'm surprised they don't kind of show him there. Weird. But yeah, the only archdevil. Oh no, we do have Bell. Okay, cool. So we do actually have a stat block for Bell. We'll go over the stat blocks, I think, after we talk about all of them, just to kind of show everybody like the powers between like all the devils and stuff. And we don't necessarily have to go through all of them specifically, since there are a lot of devils. Specifically with like the infernal hierarchy being like you have your lesser devils, greater devils, and in the lesser devils, we already kind of showed all the ones. Excuse me. For now, though, yeah, let's keep going. So the second layer of the 9 hells is known as Dis. And Dis is almost entirely covered by the city of the same name that stood in a valley surrounded by a ring of spiked mountains. And as far as most visitors and inhabitants were concerned, the layer and the city were essentially indistinguishable. Similarly to Avernus, it is covered with like fire and lava and just indescribable heat. The entire city itself was made of red hot iron. Every wall and cobblestone burned to the touch, and the material exuded a column of smoke that constantly shrouded the layer in a dark haze. Now, anyone who managed to actually leave the city could walk away from it, leaving it behind as its valley lay hidden by a ring of mountains. However, very few accounts of the city's exterior were truly known. On the other hand, approaching Dis felt like a break from reality. A traveler could only arrive at the city by following a road paved with skulls. As the walls approached, one was, without noticing a transition, suddenly inside the city, with no edge or outer wall in sight. It's interesting. Like, it's like, think of it almost like, oh man, I feel like think of it almost like an Orlando from like, the Dark Souls series.
Yeah, if everything was made out of iron.
Everything was made out of burning, scalding, smoking iron, and you couldn't see like really the edges of the city. It was just like, or even maybe better, what's Bloodborne's city called? Yharnam. Think of it like it's almost like Yharnam too. Which is pretty crazy. It's probably more like Yharnam than Anor Londo, I think, actually, because Anor Londo also has a little bit more of a benevolence to it. I think Yharnam is much more akin because it's much more gothic and dark and
I love the idea of this only for the if only for the fact that it is ostensibly the Hell's weaponsmith. It is the arms dealer of the Hells, and so the fact that
literally infernal iron is
every weapon, every piece of armor, every shield that these soldiers use in the blood war comes from Dis. Yep. And for that reason, Baator is actually probably one of Asmodeus's more trusted.
Well, he's one of his more favored. We'll say he's one of his more favored.
There's definitely more of a respect, I think.
Well, because he is, in essence, Baator has, I believe he is one of also the few like archdukes that where he was appointed like kind of first, and no one else has taken his position, and neither has Asmodeus like changed him with anybody else in his entire career, right?
No one's even really vied for it either.
No, like Baator has for the most part, and that also can be attributed to the fact that he is one of the most paranoid of all the devils and is very careful about how he does anything. But like nobody has ever really been able to vie for or attempt to usurp control of the layer of Dis from Baator. It is like, I would say like almost, it's also probably one of the few places in the layers of the 9 hell where like if you journeyed there, you could potentially have an okay time there, right? It's probably one of the more inhabitable layers of the 9 hells for any extraplanar travel, right? Because it is like, it's a huge city for the most part. And you would be there, and obviously it has rules, and you have to follow those rules to an absolute T, or risk horrendous punishment. But you can also go there in terms of being able to like trade, find valuable items or other things like that, you know?
Or, I mean, if you're a skilled enough craftsman, maybe make a name for yourself as well. I mean, there's, you know, there's the whole idea of like, I'm the greatest craftsman on the material plane. Well, you want to go over there and see if you still stack up, because if you're good enough, you might actually be.
You might get some favor. You might curry some favor.
Because again, above all else, as opposed to raw power, which was the abyss, there is also a case for being skilled. Not necessarily the most powerful, but the most skilled. Yes, a very powerful fighting force still is a very important aspect. But if you're a very skilled social interactor, if you're a very skilled craftsman, if you're a very skilled negotiator,
strategist.
Those are all
like, hence referencing Missoura back. Again, probably not the strongest devil, but she's clearly incredibly intelligent and conniving, and she can find those moments and opportunities to really push herself ahead in terms of gaining prestige. But yeah, that is the second layer of the Nine Hells, Dis, and its Archduke ruler, Baator. Would you like to take the third layer of the Nine Hells, buddy?
I would very much like to talk about the third layer of the Nine Hells. The third layer is Minaros. Is that how you say it?
Minaros. Yes.
Minaros. Okay. This is a wonderful place.
Or
not at all gross. It is the bog, swampy,
nasty. It is the worst. It is arguably the worst of all the Nine Hells for that reason.
Just listen to I love wizards sometimes because they string together a set of words that really makes me uncomfortable. The third layer of the Nine Hells is a stench-ridden bog. Acidic rain spills from the layer's brown skies, thick with layers of scum, cover its putrid surface, and yawning pits lie in wait beneath the murk to engulf careless wanderers. I love it.
Good.
I love it. And Lord. These like stone carved cities just kind of jut out from the bog at random places. And that's this whole layer. It's wonderful. Obviously they have to be quite high up because they're in a bog. But this is the home of our friend, which one? Mammon. Yeah. So I mean, this is gross time. It's not fun.
So nasty, dude. Oh my god. Good lord. Mammon. Let's see here. Yeah, they don't seem to have a stat block on D&D Beyond for him either. A lot of the Hell Lords, we don't, because I mean, I guess you're not really liable to fight them nearly as much. Like, again, that's also kind of the essence of devils, where it's like they're less inclined to really fight if they really don't have to, and more inclined to just manipulate, puppet your strings and stuff, and like, you know, or send other people to do it, rather than themselves. But we will say, though, we do have a stat sheet for Baal afterwards when we kind of go through all of them. But we can't really talk about Mammon without also talking about Baal. Let's go ahead and talk about Mammon just a little bit. Mammon is essentially depicted as like a serpentine, like almost like a naga, right? With a almost maggot-ridden, like pustule spewing top half. He is nasty. But he also has like long horns that kind of jut out, at least in like I think his newest depiction specifically. And he is known, I believe he is known as basically the Lord of Greed. Mammon is the greed incarnation, he is greed incarnate, I should say. He is potentially the richest being in existence, apparently, due to his just vast amounts of obscene hoarding of wealth and items and valuables and all kinds of stuff. Both literally and figuratively two-faced. The Archdevil Viscount was a feckless miser whose only loyalty was to coin. The count of my coins is more reliable than any roster of mortal hearts or immortal souls. Mammon.
Hey, love a guy that knows what they want.
He's very straightforward about it. He only cares about currency and coin. That's literally it. He was an utterly selfish entity that practically personified greed with his insatiable desire. He was a ruthless hunter who would unrelentingly pursue his prey, whether it be an actual quarry or future possession, but was indifferent to his prize once it was actually obtained, and would swiftly move on to new targets. While his cupidity wasn't limited to currency, Mammon was wholly materialistic and measured worth in regards to monetary value. He made deals solely for the purpose of making profit and otherwise didn't care about the results of the exchange. Alongside being avaricious, Mammon was also megalomaniacal, lusting after power and always scheming to acquire more of it. He is a nasty person in every sense of the word, personality and physically. Although there's one other who could contend with him for being like the nastiest of nasty boys of the 9 hells. He was not only sinister, but utterly shameless, a cringing wretch of an archdevil who kept his position and throne primarily by acts of flattery, connivery, and boot-licking sycophantism, most charitably described as embarrassing. So he is not above debasing himself to the utmost extreme to retain his power and position. If he is facing an entity or being that would be overall superior to him, which, to be fair, there are only a few, there wouldn't be a lot. But when there is, he is not above, like, he is that quintessential, like, anime trope guy, right? Who is just like the slimiest, sleaziest, like, kiss ass, who all they do, they are literal parasites sucking on the lifeblood of somebody more powerful than them, but are in actuality like completely weak, but they want to pretend like they're badass until they face somebody who can really stand up to them. And then they become a sniveling mess on the floor.
The funny thing is that his position is quintessential to the hells. So he runs all of the soul trade. He
is the literal treasurer. He is the literal treasurer of the hells.
I love, I mean, reading through about, like, in the Blood War section, there's talks of, like, the fact that he funds the war effort on the Blood War with the extension that any loot found on the battlefield comes back to him and his coffers. He's too cheap to upkeep his own layer.
He doesn't care.
The city is constantly
crumbling. It's literally
into the muck, and they just build new
things.
They just build new stuff on top of crumbling, sinking ruins, but yet it's still the busiest marketplace in existence. It's insane.
On its arrival, each soul that any demon or even any devil claims passes through the capital of Minaros.
Yeah,
it's known as the sinking city, and it's recorded. Like, he is, oh my god, he's just the worst, dude. He measures he's just the worst. His overall layer, though, but he also again has an individual known as Baal, which is kind of like his right hand, like one of his most valuable assets and important vassals. But he primarily, again, like, Mammon has almost essentially like loaned him out to Zariel in the Blood War, right? In Avernus, because that's where he goes.
He gets a bunch of money for it.
He's basically, astronomical amounts, no doubt. Or if at the very least, potentially what could be even more valuable in terms of gold is Zariel, a favor from Zariel or something like that. But he's essentially like a giant minotaur devil, basically. Not quite as big as Baphomet, for instance, but he's definitely like he's basically also like a minotaur devil. Charged with leading the 66 companies of barbed devils, Baal has proven to be a tactical genius, earning esteem for himself and his master as a result of victory after victory after victory over the abyssal host. Mammon relies on Baal to safeguard his holdings because of Baal's battle acumen. During a time when so many other archdevils have lost their positions, Mammon has never been ousted, which is a testament to Baal's skill on the battlefield. As far as a compliment, it's true. But again, both Baator and Mammon, they have never been usurped by anybody, to my knowledge, up to this point. They have since I want to say since its inception, basically, and since they've been placed in their position, no one else has taken it from them up to this point.
I find it funny because I half of me is like, oh, it's because they're these all-powerful beings. The other half of me is like, no one wants to deal with the sinking city. And
no.
I don't think most devils want to hang out in a soot factory either. So it's a very,
they would probably prefer not. I mean, it's even for devils, the heat of Dis is utterly unbearable a lot of the time. Like the scorching heat of Dis, it just makes even devils are just like, God, why are we here? Sometimes, like, it's crazy. But for his accomplishments, Baal has been granted the title of Bronze General. His accolades notwithstanding, he has had a difficult time navigating the quagmire of infernal politics, however. No. His critics call him naive, though never to his face. His primary interest has always been leading soldiers in battle, and so he finds it frustrating to have his ambitions of ascending to a higher rank constantly stymied by politically shrewd rivals. He's just so straightforward, which is so unlike most other devils of higher thing. Most higher devils are, again, conniving, scheming, manipulative. They like to screw with things behind the scenes rather than just be straightforward. Whereas Baal he's just straight up. He's like, what you see is what you get. He is a rarity in devil society.
Which is, I mean, kind of funny.
There's only one other archduke that would probably be similar to Baal in that regard, and is yet considered to be like the second most powerful of all of them. But that's essentially some background of Baal, who is Mammon's like vassal, much to, I would say, Baal's chagrin. Like, I don't think Baal particularly likes Mammon at all.
Probably not. Well, they seem to be almost complete opposites. In terms of kind of what they're good at,
and even more so, Mammon gains completely unfair accolades from all of Baal's accomplishments simply because he works under him.
Well, hey,
technically,
what did we say? Taking advantage of someone else's skills is a skill.
If there was no other like quintessential representation of the nine hells literally being like corporate, like America, or even corporate anywhere in the world, right? In real life, the nine hells is the perfect representation of corporate lifestyle.
Yeah.
In the real world, where
it's all like, about marketability.
All of these people so-called below these other people who are doing great work, and yet the higher up person who's like managing them is the one that gets all the credit for all the work that the actual worker put in. Like, holy crap, dude. What a political commentary, if there ever was one. But that, in essence, I would say, is what we can kind of tell you today about the third layer of the nine hells, Monaros, and its archduke and normal duke, Mammon and Baal. You want to go ahead and take the fourth layer as well, Sammy? We can also share that one too. The fourth layer is known as Phlegethos.
I was close, but you had it. It's a fiery landscape whose sieves of molten magma brew hurricanes of hot wind, choking smoke, and pyroclastic ash, which is great. So imagine, again, fiery hellscape, big volcano, obsidian fortress.
You'll see there's a theme here in the nine hells. Yeah, a lot of it is fiery.
It's almost like there's a burning theme.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a fiery burning theme going on, like a hellfire, maybe.
I would argue this, rivers of molten lava and all these things. Like, this is definitely, like, again, as the first layer was very stereotypical hell, I think this is also very stereotypical hell. Yeah. This is cool. This is, I think, the only place where it's two leaders in tandem.
There are technically speaking, this is the only layer where there is a dual archduke and archduchess who rule over this layer of the nine hells.
And it's cute. It's kind of cute. It's father and daughter.
Or maybe brother and sister. It's hard to say sometimes.
Okay, so here's the problem.
Because they go back and forth. Or mother and son.
In this iteration, it is Belial, which is the father, and Fierna, which is the daughter. Is how it's written right here.
No. It's written right here. They are variously thought of by mortals as mother and son, daughter and father, wife and husband, or ruler and consort. But none of those terms can capture the paradoxical nature of their partnership.
Yeah, it's gross.
That is the reality. No one knows really what their true relationship is, except for the fact that they are probably related, maybe? No one knows. But they engage in all manner of debaucherous, horrendous stuff all the time on that layer.
Together as buddies.
The Nine Hells is a hierarchy in which two individuals can't normally hold the same position as ruler of a single layer, and yet Asmodeus allows these two to claim dominion over Phlegethos as partners and rivals. They also like to screw with one another. And I mean that in every sense of the word, in every sense of the term. Like they
it is the Hells.
It's a weird place, man. It's super lawful, but you're also like, hey, we're open to any kind of debaucherous, crazy, sinful thing you can really think of. They don't really judge about that. They more so just judge, hey, did you get your shit done? Did you do that? All right, cool. Then you can do whatever the hell you want. We don't care.
I love this though, because you have, so obviously they work together, but at the same turn, they're also trying to undermine each other. The specialties as follows: Fierna's charisma is her main selling point, equal to only by
Asmodeus himself,
which is crazy to think of, that someone could be that skilled at one thing that you rival that, but you just don't have any of the other qualities. Whereas her father, husband, brother, son, Belial, is just a really good ruler. That is his skill set. His skill set is, I know how to run a kingdom, which again, we don't have those anymore. So we don't really think of that as a skill set, but it is intrinsically different to how,
he's a great manager. He just manages everything super well. Like,
I mean, I love this though. They seem to hate and admire one another in equal measure, and are in constant competition. Every time Belial outthinks Fierna, she talks her way out of whatever trap he has devised. Fierna stays insurrections against Belial, but his contingency plans rescue him from possible disaster. Some devils have tried to get the one up on them because they're constantly fighting, but whenever they are both threatened by an entity, it's like, oh, hey, remember that whole brother, sister, husband, wife
even
thing?
When one of them is threatened by somebody else, they will literally step in to help the other one, because it's literally like, it's almost like the thing of like, only I can kill you, or only I can take you down, or whatever, right? Where it's like, they only have a thing for each other anytime, and that's why almost nobody really likes to screw with them, because if they screw with one, they have to contend with both most of the time.
Here's the best part: the fires and molten lava and all of that stuff here doesn't harm anyone. No. Even devils that are susceptible to fire, which means technically mortals can reside here.
Yep.
Without the worry of being burned to death, slowly or quickly. It ostensibly has turned the primary city. Oh Jesus!
Avernus? Yeah, Abrimach. You can call it. Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah. I did it.
Abrimach.
It's a pleasure palace. If you are familiar with Slaanesh from Warhammer, you know exactly what this is. It is a carnival of sexual delights.
Think of Fierna and Belial. They're literally like, incubus / succubus of kind of the Nine Hells.
Yeah. But it has essentially turned this layer into almost a bit of a retreat for the denizens of the Hells. So things like, and a lot of this stuff is kind of funny because it's definitely taken after some of the entertainment that the mortals have devised for themselves over the years. So things like theaters, taverns, casinos, so I imagine it as just a giant hell-themed Las Vegas.
What's hilarious too about it is Abrimach was, first of all, it's made of volcanic rock, obsidian, and crystal.
Yeah.
And it's located on the caldera of a volcano. And it was said to have been built on top of the grave of a deity killed by Asmodeus.
I
So
love that.
they literally were just like, oh hey, there's a dead god grave. There's a god's grave. Let's build a pleasure palace on top of that, right?
Yeah.
What could be more pleasurable than that? Like
Even better, the fact that this is like this weird this dichotomy in the middle of the hells. It is also considered the Nine Hells judicial system. So contract disputes,
any
any
problems,
issue.
any issue, you go to Phlegethos and you convene with Belial and Fierna to state your case about a potential issue with any contracts that might arise, that has legitimate reason to be contested.
Which is kind of crazy. It's a completely independent institution. The only person it answers to above Belial, like this whole institution, answers directly to Asmodeus. Like, it's, yes, Belial has power, yes, he's allowed to rule on things, specifically because there are laws in place. But if there is something that's like unprecedented or whatever, it all defers back to Asmodeus. They take it to
Asmodeus.
So this is like the Supreme Court of the Nine Hells, which is great. What's awesome is, like, this isn't just like contract issues. This is like, are you a coward on the battlefield? Are you a thief? Like, things that you would normally be like, it's the Hells.
Yep.
Y'all fuck siblings over there. But evidently that's not. It's stealing.
What are we at?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to edit that one out. My
bad. Okay. I mean, we're not monetized yet anyway, so it doesn't matter. But like, oh god.
But yeah, it's fun to me. Like, this is why I like hearing about the layers, because I've looked over this before, but it's not
ridiculous.
It's not something I get to interact with often while playing D&D.
Because
it's a difficult thing to run.
It's a little bit of you would have to, you'd have to have players that trust their GM and that aren't super queasy or don't have a lot of triggers and stuff like that to kind of, if you really want to run like a fiendish campaign, there's a lot of messed up crap that happens. Like, because they're fiends. That's part of their whole shtick. They're about that debaucherous, sinful, taboo, crazy crap. All of them. And it's like, I mean, not all of them, but most of them are down for that in some way, shape, or form.
My favorite part is, while these laws are strict, is that it's such a complex system that it is just benign with loopholes and workarounds that these court cases take hundreds of years.
They could take centuries to millennia sometimes.
And it's I love it. It's so, like, you're like, oh, that's really smart, and then you look at it and you read the fine print and you're like, oh. Like, I'm never gonna, like, you can't.
So what's even worse is you spend all that time contesting, and then, like you said, you get to that point and you're just like, oh god. And
they still own your soul. My favorite thing is, like, you couldn't even try a humanoid race here because they'd be dead by the time.
No, they would just melt. They would just melt.
No, they wouldn't. It wouldn't hurt them.
Oh, we're talking about the time period. Yeah,
the time period would literally kill them before they would die.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't even work. It wouldn't even work.
God, I love the Hells.
You would need to be like a gnome or an elf, maybe a dwarf, maybe. Hard to say.
It's beautiful. And it's of course, like, it's almost like
they literally kill them with bureaucracy. They're literally just like, it's like, literally, what would be even worse is they literally, after like 1,000 years, they're like, you know what? You make a pretty decent case, sir. We are here going to remove or revoke this contract. And they're sitting there. They're just a skeleton. They're just a skeleton, just like
the head falls off.
Yeah, like, literally. Like, yeah. But then their soul comes out of their body. They're like, hooray! It's like, yeah, you're gonna go to Pandemonium now instead. And you're like, wait, what? And
they wait a minute.
Whisked off to Pandemonium, and it's even worse.
Wait just a gosh darn second there. I love it so much.
Well, y'all, that in essence, that's Phlegethos, as well as Fierna and Belial. Both of them, obviously, Belial is kind of known as like the Lord of Lies. He's the conniver, the deceiver in that way. And Fierna is, you'll also kind of see a lot of these represent, the deadly sins, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
In a lot of ways. Fierna is lust, obviously. Belial is lies. Mammon is greed. Baator, I guess, would be
what's the not pride, maybe pride?
No, he's not pride.
Not envy either, though. So
that's what I mean. Like he represents like fear. He's paranoia almost, but I'm not sure that technically that's considered like a deadly sin.
It's
because to be fair, there are 9 layers and then there are 7 sins. So obviously 1 or 2 might not correspond. But moving on from there to the fifth layer of the 9 hells. This one's particularly fun. It is Stygia. And what's interesting about this particular too, as well as the Archduke that technically governs it, his name is Levistus. And this particular archdevil, he's got quite a sordid past. he got up to a lot of shenanigans that, interestingly enough, among all of them, despite the fact that all archdukes, to a certain extent, as we've said, scheme and connive to overthrow Asmodeus, Asmodeus hasn't ever really come back at any of them to the same extent that he has punished Levistus. Levistus is essentially depicted as a beautiful, like, he is considered to be otherworldly in terms of his appeal, right? He is charismatic, beautiful, and almost benevolent in certain ways. Of all the archdukes at the time, like when he was still primarily active, most mortal followers actually liked Levistus and would be most inclined to interact with him due to the fact that he was just such a chill bro with them. He was a chill dude with them. However, some stuff happened, you see, because Levistus, many scholars theorize that he, similar to Fierna, couldn't really control his lust, as it were. He had a bit of he was too charming. He was too charismatic.
Just call him horny. It's fine.
He was horny. He was a horny dude. And you see, there is a theory, a story, and no one knows exactly, as specifically connected to Asmodeus. And as with almost any story connected to Asmodeus, it's exceedingly difficult to prove the legitimacy of any of it. Suffice it to say, though, Levistus apparently, during his earlier years, was rumored to have gotten enmeshed in an affair with the consort of Asmodeus, as well as, at the same time, getting enmeshed with another affair with Asmodeus's daughter.
Oh. I thought you were going to, for a second there, I was like, with Asmodeus?
No, Asmodeus himself doesn't really seem to care too much. He wouldn't be influenced by that type of thing.
Asmodeus isn't a super sexual being, is what
he is. He absolutely is, because his sheer charisma, like Fierna, is just like palpable. Yeah. But the only is he's not a slave to it like Fierna or Levistus might be. And so specifically how this tale kind of goes, Asmodeus's daughter, who's known as Glacia, and she actually be the next archduchess that we talk about in a different layer of the 9 hells. But his daughter Glacia, and I believe his consort Asmodeus, what is her name? I'm blanking on her name. Bensozia. So his consort Bensozia had apparently, as Levistus had been journeying to Nesus, which is the final layer of the 9 hells, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. As is always the case, Asmodeus calls every once, I believe, a year, maybe more, basically a convent or a meeting of all the lords of the hells, right? Every archduke and maybe duke, he literally forces them. They don't get to choose. He literally teleports them all to his abode, his castle, to basically get a like yearly or annual update of how hell is running, right? And as well as the blood war too. And so during these particular visits that would happen, apparently his consort, Bensosia, I guess potentially took a liking to Levistus due to his charismatic ability, his intelligence, and not just that, but his valor in, you know, the blood war and everything or whatever. And they apparently started to engage in an affair with one another. However, due to at one point when Asmodeus was journeying throughout the layers of the 9 hells to basically see for himself how all of his hell lords were conducting themselves and taking care of their layers, he also journeyed with his family, including his daughter Glacia, to the realm of Stygia, where Levistus was the Archduke. And she took a liking to Levistus and began to engage in an affair with him as well. And it's difficult to say exactly when, but at one point, it's hard to say whether or not like Glacia found out about the affair with her mother and Levistus and sought to specifically take vengeance by killing her mother and out of jealousy. And due to that, instead of Asmodeus showcasing like, oh, well, that makes my family seem kind of weak and divided, and I guess me as a result weak, he instead blamed that on Levistus. And as such, either it was that, or it was that Levistus himself also was attempting to gain an upper hand over Asmodeus by utilizing both him and Bensosia, who had information and was going to usurp him. So Asmodeus killed Bensosia, and instead of killing Levistus, instead blamed Bensosia's death on him. So it's hard. Nobody knows exactly how or who or why. A lot of people also believe that Asmodeus knew about the affair the entire time, and instead was literally allowing it and utilizing that as an exact reason to have a reason to punish Levistus, to basically be like, yeah, no, he wants to do that to my wife. She's also kind of a conniving backstabber. I don't really like her. So I'm going to use this as a great excuse to take them both out. And
gotta love the house.
And instead, again, I don't know if it was specifically, I doubt that it was Asmodeus himself who took Bensosia out, but people also believe that he deliberately took Glacia to Stygia so that she would be interested in Levistus, which would then eventually lead her out of jealousy to killing her mother for Asmodeus. So then he could then lay it on Levistus's shoulders to punish him, to keep him in check, because he was rising too quickly in terms of his power. Because again, he was able to amass a ton of souls because a lot of mortals just loved the way he did business with him. And so he manipulated essentially 3 separate archdevils himself into taking each other out. And he also now has a reason of keeping Glacia under a little bit more control in her own layer of the hells. Also specifically connected, I believe, to I think Beelzebub actually as well, which we'll talk about later. But suffice it to say, I say all of this because it's important to know Levistus's current predicament is he is eternally, impenetrably trapped in a literal iceberg in Stygia, to forever to forever float through the river Styx as a literal iceberg, like trapped there. He still has awareness. However, he is completely aware of everything happening around him and the passage of time the entire time. But he cannot move, he can't talk, he can't interact with anybody really, except slightly. I take it back, he can slightly interact with people. He has the ability to still gives
orders.
He can give orders. He also still has the ability to give warlocks power, for instance. Like you can still make pacts with him. He can still make contracts, but he is severely limited in what he is capable of truly doing. His power is severely locked inside this iceberg with him. And even worse, even funnier, is he also on that layer of abyss, or sorry, of the 9 hells. I keep wanting to say abyss because it's like the abyssal layers, but the 9 hells. On that layer of the 9 hells, he also has to contend with another duke the entire time, known as Geryon. Geryon is like this big, like he's got like an elongated jaw. He's like a big bat-like kind of devil who has humanoid features, long flowing hair,
Awesome.
and seriously hates Levistus.
Oh yeah, they're
like
in a never-ending war.
With a passion, hates them. They are in a never-ending war trying to gain control over Stygia. Geryon has not succeeded up to this point because he's not nearly as conniving, cunning, intelligent as Levistus is. But that's just another thing that Asmodeus placed as another means of keeping Levistus in check for what happened. Seemingly. But in reality, it's most likely that Asmodeus planned for all of that to happen anyway. Like he wanted to get rid of his consort because she was annoying and untrustworthy. And not even in the sense of like sleeping around with people. I don't think he really cares about that, because also in the hells, it might not even really matter like that. But more so that he's just like, she's a potential weak spot that I don't really want to have anymore. So potentially got rid of her. Some people believe also it was literally a pit fiend of Asmodeus himself who maybe took her out, who like masqueraded as her bodyguard and took her out. But again, nobody knows. Nobody knows for certain what happened. All they know is that the fallout, Levistus took it all. And because of that, he is now permanently trapped in this iceberg, except for one day, once a year, when Asmodeus calls all of the Hell Lords to his abode in Nesus. The one time he is then freed from his Antarctic prison, basically. So I just imagine it. The image I have in my head is literally like once a year, he teleports Levistus from his iceberg prison to his abode, and he's just like wet, dripping, like cold, and like Asmodeus is just like sitting there. He's just like, "Oh, hey, what's going on, bud? How you doing? How you going, bro? Like, how's life in Stygia?
Yeah, what's happening?
Yeah,
how around much?
How have things been, bud? You know,
any vacations as of late?"
And it's like, it's hilarious because again, that's exactly what Asmo would do. He would just screw with him like that.
It's wonderful.
It's great. But the plane of Stygia itself, as maybe you might have gotten an idea, is essentially a vast frozen wasteland of utter unbearable cold temperatures. It is horrible there. Almost no devil really cares about Stygia except for one thing: the river Styx that flows through it. The river Styx is one of the few aspects of the D&D multiverse where if you sail the river Styx, it can take you anywhere it flows. Like, even regardless of even what Asmodeus chooses, if you sail the river Styx, hopefully without losing all of your memories from taking a dip in there, you can travel to any layer of not just the 9 hells where the river Styx flows through, but potentially the abyss, the material plane. What is it? I'm forgetting the other layer, or not the layer, but the other plane of existence.
Hades?
That's concur. I think Hades would also be one, I believe. Another one would be Gehenna. That's what I was thinking of. Gehenna. I believe the river Styx also flows to the Gehenna. I might be wrong about that. Don't quote me.
I think it does.
But you can literally, with like, no one can stop the river Styx, right? It's also why it can flow through the abyss. And so if you gain control of the river Styx, you can potentially ferry your forces right past
Everything.
any potential enemy, like, battlements, fortifications, or defenses, and hit them from behind anywhere where the river Styx flows. Now, it's hard to do that, specifically because a completely separate fiendish race and beings have control of the river Styx. And both demons and devils specifically have to contend with them and work through them to gain any real ability to utilize. Because again, the Styx is hard to sail through because of the effects it has on any creature. It literally can wipe your entire memory. Like it obliterates your memories. Literally, it's like It's like the Obliviate spell from Harry Potter.
Oh, okay.
Where you completely lose any and all memory if you so much as like touch it slightly. You take a slight dip, you lose. I don't know if it maybe takes all of your memory. It might depend on how long you stay in it. But I know if like you even like slightly dip your toe or finger in it, and you'll lose like a shit ton of your memory. Like it has the effect of like, as a player character, you could lose player levels from taking a dip in the river Styx, because you literally lose all of that experience that you accumulated to that point. Was how it was run back in the day, I believe.
All I can think of is the Gene Wilder yelling, "You lose!" That's all I can think of in this specific instance.
But suffice it to say, if an individual was able to utilize the river Styx and was able to traverse it like with impunity, they would have unfettered access to a myriad of planes throughout the cosmos. So that being the case, Stygia is only truly valuable kind of for that particular thing.
I mean, it's also the reality is any field of war has its value in money that can be made, souls that can be used, et cetera, et cetera. So like there is a large mercenary trade there. It is the only other like active war in the Hells aside from the Blood War. So I mean, if you want to make money and rise in the ranks and prove your mettle, this is an opportunity to do so. For those that aren't politically inclined or are more focused on power or like earning money through some less than savory means, Stygia is a valuable place. It is not content, like not,
I mean, it doesn't offer necessarily a ton of resources or like use, except for the fact that it is literally it is like the vast amount of the river Styx, right? Yeah. Like it's literally a vast ocean of frozen ocean for the vast majority of it, right?
Yeah. But it's also a training ground.
It's a training ground for a lot of like devils, legions and stuff like that. But otherwise, again, it doesn't have much of a purpose compared to the vast majority of the rest of the Hells.
Not a conventional one, no. But
not really. And so honestly, it's also one of the few that has the most, one can even say it's the most, almost ironically, chaotic layer of the Nine Hells, because it's inhabited by several more aggressive creatures, such as like direwolves, frost worms, krakens, mammoths, polar bears, sharks, and rimmer
frost giants.
Yeah, frost giants could also maybe even ice dragons too, if they like, or white dragons, if they maybe left the Avernus after whatever, you know what I mean? And so it's like, that is in essence, like it's once more another slap in Levistus's face by Asmodeus, by basically being like, hey, you're stuck here with this majorly kind of useless and barren landscape of utter frigid death and desolation to watch over this for me, because it can come in handy at some point, but until I work out the way to make that happen, you're just gonna stay here and keep watch on it for me. Oh, and you're also gonna war with Geryon too, because
forever.
Yeah, because I also don't like Geryon. He was kind of an asshole. He was getting too uppity as an archduke, so I'm gonna make you the archduke. But also you can't do anything. So that's also a shit in Geryon's mouth too, because I'm making you, who can't do shit, the actual Archduke, for which he has to listen to when I say. But you guys can also war it out too in the meantime. So have fun with that. And then he leaves. Like it's just like, it's the ultimate like double FU to both of them.
It's wonderful because it even in this you and you can even tell how much better of an Archduke Levistus is from the fact that all he can do is sit there and he's still more successful than Geryon. So like there's so many levels to the insult and the way that it's played out in this layer of the hell, which I think is great. I love it. It's different intrinsically than pretty much all of the other layers in that sense.
And not even just like, obviously almost every other layer before this had some connection to heat or fire or whatever. This is the first one now where it's literally the polar opposite of ice. It is a cold thing because it was literally Geryon was the original leader and Archduke of Stygia, but after Asmodeus felt that, like, you know, Levistus was Levistus's punishment, so to speak, after being stuck in ice for a millennia was done, he instead ousted Geryon and transferred full control of Stygia to Levistus. But he's still stuck in that ice even to this day.
Gotta love it.
At this point, though, he is still, again, Levistus is still able to conduct all his affairs from within the ice, and he became an expert as a result at trading souls of the prosecuted and criminals in exchange for a quick escape. So he almost is still a more, maybe not benevolent, but like, you know, for people who are looking to get out of imprisonment, whether it be lawful, unjust or not, hey, Levistus will be there for you in his horrid, cold landscape. We can talk a little bit about Geryon as well, I think, since he's mentioned as well. Geryon, similarly, almost to Mammon, is also like, again, like I said, he's kind of like a giant bat-like scorpion devil. Like he's got like a long, elongated mouth, like giant bat-like wings, and like a serpentine tail that ends in like a scorpion stinger. Ooh. He's pretty gnarly. He's a pretty gnarly devil. He returned once he was ousted by Asmodeus from the position as ruler of Stygia. He later returned and sought to reclaim his lair from the frozen prince Levistus. He typically stood about 10 feet tall with a serpentine body, all that. Before being deposed, Geryon was among the most content of the archdevils, interestingly enough, satisfied with conducting his hunts and allowing his subjects to maintain his empire while avoiding the politics that plagued the nine hells. He was still an incessant being that persistently pursued his quarry beforehand, but he had become more jealous after being overtaken, applying his determined hunter attitude to regaining his former authority. Now, essentially, what I believe, like, was the reason he was ousted by Asmodeus was because of the fact that he became too complacent, right? One of the biggest things that Asmodeus wants and strives to make out of all his hell lords is they need to be proactive. He likes to keep them on their toes. He wants to keep them paranoid, progressive, active in all things so that they don't become complacent and weak, because he believes that any machine, any being, any organism, any whatever is only as strong as its weakest link. And he will do everything in his power to ensure that that weakest link is always powerful, progressive, and striving for better, right? That's what Asmodeus is all about. He is in the ever constant pursuit of perfection. And to do that, you cannot have complacency. And so therefore, anyone who becomes too complacent, he will do whatever. He will throw in some shit to stir up trouble to then make it like this. Geryon has now begun to actively try to reclaim his lair from Levistus. And so Asmodeus not only keeps him in check, but also continues to spur him to be better than he was before. But with that, let's move on to the sixth layer of the abyss, as well as a little bit of an insight into the current ruling Archduchess, who played a bit of a role in the previous Archduke's current predicament. The sixth layer of the Nine Hells is known as Malbolge, or Malbolge, some might say. I like to say Malbolge is kind of how I like to pronounce it, but it is ruled specifically by Glacia, the Archduchess of Malbolge, as well as Asmodeus's daughter, apparently. Again, no one really knows. Like, people, again, I believe that Glacia was the offspring of Asmodeus and his consort Bensozia, but I don't know if there's actually any true confirmation of this overall. She is known as the Princess of the Nine Hells for obvious reasons, and one of the most powerful and influential of the female devils. The Dark Prodigy was an unpredictable archdevil known for her subversiveness and ability to be completely uncalculable. She is unpredictable in that way. One of her favorite quotes is, "Of course I love my father. Without him, whom would I have to strive against?" That is a perfect, great way to sum up devils in short order. Glacia appeared most predominantly as a 9-foot tall, black-haired figure similar in form to a succubus. She was well-built and of unearthly beauty that remained undiminished by the small horns, large leathery wings, and forked tail that gave away her diabolical origins. Glacia was perhaps the least predictable of any archdevil, with a reputation of capriciousness and a history of whimsy and mischief. She took pride in her nonconformity and openly flouted the norms of hell at her leisure, breaking tradition while bending the rules. Surprising others with unexpected gambits was a source of delight for her, and even before she became an archdevil, excuse me, she was somewhat rebellious and defiant, moving between courts as the mood struck her. So she is, in essence, a complete oddity in devil society and hierarchy.
As a hoe too.
She well, I mean, to be fair, a lot of devils would be a hoe, but she's a hoe in the sense of like she's an asshole. You know what I mean? Like she is just like she is an oddity in the sense that she's almost demon-like in a lot of her behavior. But obviously she does this as she has that special position as Asmodeus's daughter, you know, where she has a special connection to the Hells, which allows her probably a little bit more freedom. And I hesitate to say whether or not Asmodeus, I feel like he has to. I feel like she is able to do so because Asmodeus allows her to do so. And
well, I mean, I love the fact that it's like it's all about just not getting convicted. They know she's a criminal. She started the first crime syndicate. She, bought souls with money that didn't exist. So she committed soul fraud. But like that's the reality is she comes from a position where they're like can we really like
well, because she's also good at what she does, right? Really and that's why there's a certain amount of like respect that is afforded to her, specifically even by Asmodeus himself. But we'll also talk a little bit about her lair of the Nine Hells. Malbolge is a prison of the Nine Hells. It is the place where all of the most infamous criminals and despised individuals reside and are entrapped.
It's so good. It's so good.
Glacia, the rebellious daughter of Asmodeus, as again, due to her nature and the whole thing that kind of happened, Asmodeus used the previous, unfortunate event with Levistus as another reason to hold her down, right? To tie her with her potential connection or maybe even involvement in the affairs.
Yeah.
To have her set here with extra responsibility, again, almost like an extra FU to her, being like, hey, you're the rebellious, criminal, whatever, but you are now the literal, what do they call the
she's an
warden.
Informant.
She's the warden of the 9 hells. She is the warden of Malbolge, rules the place and oversees the punishments doled out to devils that stray from their assigned tasks. These lawbreakers are put on trial in Phlegethos, and if they are found guilty, they are dispatched to Malbolge to endure years of torment. That Glacia is both prison warden and the 9 hells' most notorious criminal is evidence that in the infernal realms, crime pays as long as you avoid being convicted. Now, the layer of Malbolge itself comprises one infinitely large, steep-sloped mountain. Boulders and other debris rain down from its heights in frequent avalanches, and some of the structures here are erected atop pillars of adamantine embedded in the mountain that can withstand the constant battering, though the platforms they support sway under the force of the onslaught. Now, some condemned devils are typically trapped in these cages, which are lowered on chains to hang beneath the platforms. From such a vantage, the prisoners are continually battered by Malbolge's avalanches, causing injuries that are agonizing but never fatal. Now,
you gotta love it. It's creative.
Of all the lords of the 9, Glacia is the most unpredictable, as we've stated. She loves to flaunt the rules of tradition and bends the law without breaking it. She delights in shocking others by springing gambits that catch them unaware, and mortals who go up against overwhelming odds with an audacious plan attract her attention and could even win her respect and patronage.
I love that.
Like, capable.
Dude, I love the idea of like a crazy revolutionary ending up getting power from her, not because they're evil necessarily, but just because they come up with these inane plans and somehow succeed, and it's eventually they start succeeding because there's someone helping them along the way a little bit, just for fun, because she's the only devil that's going to help you for fun.
She would. I mean, that's the thing. She almost, in the way she acts, is almost akin to demon behavior, almost, where it's like she just on a whim can start to do all these different things, but it's also still intrinsically tied to her nature, and almost what I would feel as Modius classifies as an absolute necessity for the hells. It's like, hey, she's almost like the person that you hire to find the loopholes in anything so that you can shore them up to make it even more ironclad tight.
She gives me like evil archfey vibes.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Like there's because do we know definitely who else she came from besides Asmodeus? So like there's a chance.
We don't even know for certain she came from Asmodeus. He literally just brought her through a tour of the 9 hells and
was like, this is my daughter,
and presented her as his daughter to everyone.
I mean, albeit probably not the case, but like this could be a infernally corrupted archfey.
Absolutely, in my opinion.
To me, that
but she also cool. But my point being is that also is the antithesis of the hells. Archfey, Fey themselves are intrinsically tied to the chaotic alignment. Usually chaotic neutral, some of them can be chaotic good, but primarily chaotic neutral. And so the fact that, again, I feel like almost Asmodeus brought her in here or created her with the explicit purpose of being like a person who finds the cracks and the weaknesses in your like defense and like say like a safe, right? And your security system. And she's the one that finds it, points it out, and at that point, Asmo can be like, oh, okay, all right, let's fix that then. Let's shore that up. We're gonna seal in that crack to make it even better. I feel like that's almost her purpose in a way. And that's just my personal opinion. That's not necessarily been confirmed, but that's how I feel like based off of her like effect on the hells since she was introduced. Like that's kind of how I feel about it.
I mean, it's cool because now that she's been given a station, she can't obviously break every rule there is to break. She can bend them, walk around them, and figure out ways to do stuff. So there is still a semblance of order in her actions. Her goals, I think it's more orders in her goals, not necessarily her actions. She has specific things she wants to accomplish. The way she goes about it is intrinsically different than every other devil there. And I think that's the fun part. That's like you need someone to kind of ruffle the feathers.
Yeah, you got to shake things up a little bit in order to learn something new, you know?
I love it.
But she, in essence, like, she's a great character. I feel like, again, she would be a great use in RP. Like she would be an absolute, like, again, not even just the fact that she is the apparent daughter of Asmodeus, but even like you just said, she would probably be the most likely, or well, some of the most likely to directly interact with mortals in that way, especially a party of adventurers who are facing overwhelming odds. Like she would be the type, like if you had an adventure through the Nine Hells and the party had to at one point or even multiple points contend with like the other archdukes, and we're like, hey, let's make a deal. Let's play a game. You have to accomplish this thing and I will let you continue on. Glacia would absolutely be secretly helping them. Like she would love to do that, just as one, a means of undermining the other archdukes. Two, they're facing overwhelming odds that she loves to be able to like participate in, to help with, and to see the looks on the people's faces when they accomplish, survive, or overcome those odds. It would be great.
Okay, this is fantastic. This is like the direct one of the things that she did that you can't, like, I love this. I'll do it quickly.
Please do.
It's the coin legions.
Yep.
So taking a cue from sword, shield, and drag legions, which are like the different army companies ostensibly in the Hells.
Yeah.
Glacia established a new category of legion, the coin legion, ostensibly being a thieves guild on the material plane. They have one advantage compared to their mortal contemporaries: her knowledge of the law. Knew that in many cases, procedures that devils observed and obeyed as laws were merely traditions, and failing to observe a tradition carries no penalty
according to the law, the real law of the Nine Hells.
So her scheme involved using counterfeit currency to buy souls in Mineros and selling them soon after to turning incredible profit. When the truth of her dealings became apparent, she defended her actions based on the legal definition of a coin as minted in Mineros.
Yep.
Which is great. So she basically figured out a way around this, which also means that there are thieves guilds directly established by an archdevil in both the Nine Hells and the material
plane. Yep.
Which is crazy. I love that. Imagine
she completely undermined all of that, because it's like, again, a lot of it is like, well, yeah, this is just tradition. This is just like, if you're honorable and this is how we do business. And she's like, fuck that. I'm gonna do it this way, and completely take advantage of all of this stuff.
Which is the main reason why she was conscripted into being an archdevil and assigned to
she was
that
already
layer.
On the so-called fast track, but she carved out her own means.
Well, no, it wasn't even. So that's the funny thing. It was a punishment. It wasn't a promotion, because
no, because it restricts her more now.
And so that's hilarious.
She has actual responsibilities that she has to take care of or face punishment.
Yeah, that's I love it. I love this. It's such a great.
Yep.
Oh, it's such a good workaround.
It's pretty hilarious. Let's move on to the 7th layer of the Nine Hells, titled Maladomini. Maladomini is the 7th layer of the Nine Hells, and it is ruled by the Archduke known as Balzabul. Now, to be fair, like it's obviously a version of the devil Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies, yada yada,
or Beelzebub.
Beelzebub. Yeah,
there's like 100 different ways to say.
There really is, and they're choosing to go with like Balzabul. But Balzabul, as you may have guessed, he is also known as the Lord of the Flies. He is legitimately a large slug-like, just nasty, disgusting, putrid, like blob of a devil. Hang on, let me even just see if I can, like, yeah. He's a literal slug of a devil. Balzabul, formerly an archon known as Triel, was the lord of Maladomini, the most infamous archdevil next to Asmodeus himself. He was known as the Lord of the Flies because his webs of intrigue were so tightly woven that not even flies could escape. But the form he was cursed with by Asmodeus earned him a new hated title, the Slug Lord, the Slug Archduke. Eventually, he managed to overcome this wretched state and return to his previous glory, and if only to retain it, had never told a lie to his kin since. Through sufficient penance and grace, even the lowliest can redeem themselves. Am I not a living testament to that fact? Now, technically speaking, it says that he has like regained his so-called like previous form, which I guess, but he also still is depicted often as like his slug lord form.
Well, like at this point, I think it's like a half and half situation.
Yeah,
where it's like his lower body is still slug. He might have some human features up top or like humanoid features, but he is still big slug guy.
Yeah,
for all intents and purposes.
He is still predominantly slug-like in many ways. He's basically like slightly less horrifically slug like he was before. But I mean, he's as still... made him. But he's still exceedingly powerful and dangerous. Now, we'll talk a little bit about Maladomini real quick. The lair. Maladomini was once a bustling realm of vibrant cities and a panoply of roads, gardens, and bridges. It was the center of Hell's bureaucracy, where every edict, law, and order was dutifully copied and filed away.
Not anymore.
With each passing year, the devils would add more fortresses and archives to Maladomini to house all their records. And then came the single greatest act of treachery in the annals of the Nine Hells. At the time, the archdevil Beelzebul was so powerful that he ruled 2 layers of the Hells, both Maladomini and Malbolgia. He conspired to topple Asmodeus and replace him, which in itself was not a crime. But in order to work his plans, he knowingly altered documents that passed into his care with the intent of confounding the apparatus of the bureaucracy itself. And before his scheme could come to true fruition, he was caught and subjugated to, at this point, is known as the most bizarre of punishments. He was transformed. In that time long past, Beelzebul believed that he could cast Asmodeus as incompetent and amass a force to replace him before Asmodeus's allies could act. But his calculations failed to take into account the unpredictability of the Blood War. A sudden offensive from the abyss struck Avernus just as Beelzebul was about to put his plan in motion, and Beelzebul directed most of his shield legions to stay out of the fight, instead of helping to hold the line against the demons so that he could use them in staging his coup. And the absence of those legions, however, enabled the horde to push close to the doorstep of Dis. Now, Beelzebul was forced to abandon his plans, realizing that the Nine Hells would be of little use to him if it was overrun with demons, and ultimately he united the other archdevils to turn back the invasion. But when an investigation of the events uncovered his treachery, Beelzebul didn't submit to punishment, and Maladomini was racked with fighting as the other lords of the Nine took to the field themselves against the conspirator. The resulting devastation left much of the lair in absolute ruins. And after Beelzebul was overwhelmed and defeated, Asmodeus stripped him of his rulership of Malbolgia, but left him in charge of Maladomini, albeit with a new set of duties. Asmodeus knew that Beelzebul's superior intellect and propensity for lying would make him the ideal representative of the bureaucracy of the Hells in the worlds of mortals. So, to ensure his loyalty while taking advantage of his talents, Asmodeus enacted 2 laws concerning him. First, whenever Beelzebul lied to a devil, he would transform into a slug-like creature, hideous to all who beheld him for 1 year. This penalty was retroactive, covering several millennia of deceptions and untruths, and only recently has Beelzebul worked off all those transgressions and been returned to his former humanoid form. In all that time, he has not told a lie to another devil since, and his continued honesty is motivated by his desire to keep his current appearance. That was the first thing. Second, Asmodeus decreed that any deal Beelzebul strikes shall end in disaster for the other party. For this reason, other devils avoid forming alliances with him like he's the plague, even though they know he is compelled not to lie to them. Mortals, on the other hand, know nothing of the situation and still offer their souls to him. His ability to scheme neutralized by these limitations, Baalzebul continues to ensure that the devil's bureaucracy runs smoothly. He focuses most of his attention on gathering souls from the material plane, a task to which his talent for lying is well suited. Now,
So
that was
lie to mortals, just not to devils.
exactly.
Well, he can. It just.
Well, no, he can't. He literally is incapable of lying to devils. He can't.
I thought that
do
if
it.
he does, is when he turns into a
Wait,
slug.
no, you're right. He can, and he will turn into a slug.
So they know.
specifically.
They ostensibly know that he's full
so
of
they
shit.
would know that he would be lying. As soon as he lied, his entire form would transform into a slug. And what was hilarious is like he had to not tell a single lie in order to transform back that entire time. That was millions of years.
What makes me laugh is that what he did wouldn't have been as much of an issue if he didn't like forge documents.
Exactly.
Like if he had just
him literally trying to usurp Asmodeus isn't against the rules.
No, it's the other thing it's everything else he did.
It's the fact that he screwed around with the actual bureaucracy. If like the moment you fuck with the law of the hells, that's when you screw up. You can undermine each other. You can attack each other. You can do whatever. But the moment you screw with the law, that is the only literal ironclad thing of the hells. Don't screw with the law. It is iron. It is airtight, iron sealed with like casings of malachites and casings of mithril over it. You cannot get out of it in the hells. But he did. And then he didn't.
Yeah, well, he never really got away with it because it was never good for him.
He again, he got close, apparently. Yeah. He got close. He was like, oh, I'm going to enact this thing. But then he didn't account for the chaoticness of the blood war. And that led to his unfortunate
gosh darn
downfall.
Blood war.
What was also hilarious, too, was I believe a punishment to Glacia for her whole thing was also to become the consort of Baalzebul. They were supposed to be like almost the dual rulers of Malbolgia. Like, because until I believe she like literally was like, absolutely not. He is a disgusting, horrendous, whatever. And and was not down for that at all. Yeah. But that in essence, that is Baalzebul. And his lair, Maladamini, is a crumbling, decimated ruin of basically like archives, filing systems, and other things like that to this day. Because again, literally, he is the sole perpetrator of the event that caused literally every other archduke to attack him, to come. They took the field themselves by Asmodeus's decree. The other 8 came, or the other 7 came, and were like, yo, this is not okay.
That's crazy.
Oh my Lord. I can't even imagine what that would really look like. Like, good Lord. But that in essence is the Lord of the Flies, Baalzebul, to a certain extent. Still not the full totality of his whole history or whatever, but just the highlights. Again, some of the coolest stuff that I felt like was important to tell about devil, society. Let us move on to the 8th layer, known as Cania. Cania is ruled by the Archduke, and he is one of my all-time favorite Archdukes. I love this guy. He is known as Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles is probably the most, aside from Asmodeus, the most quintessential depiction of a devil you will ever really think of. Blazing red skin, large protruding horns, giant wings, He is a prolific spellcaster and is in many ways the one truly closest to Asmodeus in terms of power and ability. But the funny thing about Mephistopheles, or sometimes shortened to Mephisto, he's like literally hell's greatest wizard. And he is a walking contradiction because on the surface, he's like super cool, calm, and calculating. He's literally known as the Cold Lord. But beneath all of that grandiose, like cool-headed, he is like a hot-headed Lord of Hellfire. See, here's the thing. The term Hellfire, that's an actual thing. He created that. Mephisto is the actual source origin creator as a wizard of the ability known as Hellfire. And it's been one of the biggest contributions to the Hells ever since, and why he is also considered to be one of the most influential and powerful devils in the Hells. Again, he is literally only, in terms of true power, he is only second to Asmodeus. And the funniest thing too, is he outwardly, actively proclaims that he is going to someday replace Asmodeus. He will say this to Asmodeus's face. Like, he is like, I am going to defeat and usurp you one of these days. Like, I am going to show that I am the best and most powerful devil who deserves to be the supreme ruler. He doesn't even want to kill Asmodeus. He literally just like, I am better than you, and I will prove it one of these days, and I'm going to replace you, and you're going to have to bow to me someday. And Asmodeus is kind of just like, dope, cool, yeah, keep at it, my man. Honestly, you're doing great work. Like, the contributions that Mephistopheles makes to the Nine Hells is almost unsurpassed in terms of like the quantity and the amount that he can contribute and does. And because he does such great work, Asmodeus is like, yeah, that's great, do it. Keep doing your best to surpass me, please. I am like, but because also another thing is Mephistopheles is also unquestionably loyal to Asmodeus.
Yeah.
He's not like he is kind of a conniver and a schemer, but not really. Like, again, similarly to Baal, who we talked about before, who's like who's underneath Mammon, who's like Mammon's subordinate. Mephistopheles is so much more straightforward. Like, he's not nearly as like conniving and manipulative and because he's so powerful, he's just upfront about it. He's like, I will handle this shit like this. This is how I will do this because I'm the best, because I am amazing. I don't have to be underhanded or subversive or anything like that. Like, Mephistopheles, let's go into a little bit of his thing. Like, again, I love this motherfucker. Mephistopheles played up his infernal image as much as possible, intentionally appearing as the classic archetype of a diabolical devil. He was 9 feet tall, 2.7 meters, and striking. His handsome visage and charming yet unnerving smile of self-superiority contrasted by his more monstrous features. His fiendish claws, bright crimson red skin, large bat-like wings, and impressive curling ram horns all left his hellish heritage on proud display. Another source of contrast was his dead white eyes against his long, straight, jet black hair, as well as his dramatic flowing cape as the dark and deepest void. Earlier reports of Mephistopheles claimed that he once had an image more befitting of Cania. He had blue-black skin across his heavily muscled body, wings, horns, all that stuff. However, Mephistopheles was a being of razor-sharp instinct, careful suspicion, and prodigious brilliance, a cunning genius with an unparalleled understanding of hell's political dangers and a great capacity for patient deception. Foremost wizard of Baator, his ordinary speech was like a whispering wind, and his cool, pleasant demeanor gave him the outward appearance of a princely gentleman. He came off as sophisticated and charming when he spoke, an intellectual force of understated wit, reason, and self-restraint, and embodied the casually crafty aspect of hell's evil. However, This was by no means his ordinary behavior, but a facade like Baator's, which disguised his true personality. A veneer of elegance as carefully crafted as his traditionally infernal appearance. Despite his courteous persona, Mephistopheles was an unstable individual on the inside. The contrast between his cold surface and fiery core, a perfect example of his existence as a walking contradiction. Mephistopheles was a vicious being with an outrageous temper, who, when alone in his palace, frequently flew into violent rages, his quick wit burning away when met with his underlying hate and frustration. In his shrieking fits of terrible wrath, he would start tearing at his own skin and destroying his surroundings in explosive outbursts of fiery, magical destruction. In his unpredictable eruptions of rage having been his undoing multiple times in the past. Although his conniving intelligence was certainly real, Mephistopheles was an emotional entity that was ultimately driven by his passions. And so that's also why, like, he's like the perfect archetype of like a supervillain who is always his own worst enemy. If anybody knows anything about like Marvel comics, like the character known as Doctor Doom, right? Mephistopheles would be like the perfect representation of D&D's version of Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is incredibly, and he is one of the most intelligent beings in the universe, but it is his intelligence is only truly rivaled by his arrogance, which is most often always his downfall. Which is the same with Mephistopheles. Like, Mephistopheles is so incredibly intelligent, but he's also the most arrogant that he cannot see how his intelligence gets the better of him, right? He automatically assumes he's better than everything and everyone. And that oftentimes causes him to make poor decisions or choices because he also then flips out in terms of fits of rage. He also has problems with obsession. Like, he when he gets stuck onto something, he will doggedly pursue that one thing that he's obsessed with until he gets stuck on something else. And then he'll leave that thing like half finished or like almost finished, but then not finished. And he'll never go back to that thing because then he'll be obsessed with this other thing until something else strikes his fancy. And then he'll leave that thing unfinished and then keep going on to the next thing. And again, he's so good at it. He's so like talented and capable that he's able to make all kinds of incredible, amazing plans and new things. Again, hellfire, all these contributions. But eventually, if he gets bored of it or something else, like it's like a new shiny thing happens, his attention, he's got ADHD. Or he's got ADD like out the wazoo with that stuff.
Well, he's like obsessive, but he's always trying to find the next thing to obsess over.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's cool though, because with that comes the fact that like if you ever are trying to find some piece of knowledge, some magical lore, something, he's who definitely
probably got it. He's
like,
it's one thing got it.
It's one thing to pray to the gods and ask for answers. It's another to go to someone who actually spent millennia figuring it out. Because the difference, I think the key difference with the devils is that they are not omnipotent. They have worked for what they have in their own way. Like they hold the knowledge that they do because they've learned it and they've kept it and they've hoarded it and they've used their ways to figure it out. And he's a perfect example of someone that worked his entire existence to know what he knows and is quite proud of it. And that's he's almost an agreeable entity if you like to someone who is looking for that knowledge. That's almost something to like envy. And so it's a cool dichotomy because he is evil. He is, but he's also ironically he's almost innocent in a certain sense of like how open, like for instance, his pride, right? While his anger and neurotic tendencies were weaknesses which he could either hide or use to his advantage, Mephistopheles' most damaging issues were his rampantly unchecked megalomania and recklessness in the pursuit of power. Though he'd hate to be compared to Beelzebub, both archdevils seemed incapable of being content and compulsively overextended themselves. Beelzebub's plans collapsing under the weight of his unrealistic expectations, and Mephistopheles becoming so absorbed in his plans that he ignored his overall well-being.
Mephistopheles' manifestation of greed, however, was somewhat opposite to that of the Lord of the Lies, who hid his goals through skillfully woven deception. Since Mephistopheles' execution of wicked plots was always extreme and dramatic, his brazen ambition almost glorious in its nakedness. He wouldn't hide anything. He wouldn't be subtle. He would be in your face about it all the time. Like, I love it, though. He's great. I freaking love him. He's probably my most favorite because he's so, again, I love Dr. Doom too for the same exact reason. Is they're so unabashedly arrogant, but they're also intelligent enough to back it up. But it's also exactly because of that arrogance that they make themselves out to be like goobers all the time. They literally are their own worst enemy, but they're too arrogant to even recognize it. That is what I love about evil, right? That is always like a great way. It's like evil is always like, we're so powerful, but they're always almost their own worst enemy, because even though it's such a stereotype where it's like, oh, the evil guy begins to like, wax poetic about his evil plan, right? But it's also hilarious because it's also not super unrealistic in the sense that it's like, why wouldn't an arrogant asshole want to do that? He doesn't believe you can stop him. And in fact, he would love to be applauded and lauded and praised for his ingenious, his intelligence, his ability, his power. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do all of this stuff and you can't do anything about it. And then it's like, oh, wait, they did something? How did you do that? Like, and then he flies off into a rage and can't for the life of him actually be able to realize that he himself is his own worst enemy. He is, in essence, he would probably be best represented as envy or pride. Like, I feel like he takes both pride and, well, no, maybe I should say Asmodeus technically takes pride. So we'll say he takes envy in a sense, because like he hates the fact that Asmodeus is higher than him, right? He is always envious of Asmodeus and always constantly trying to get it. So if we want to go back over like all of them, Zariel is obviously rage. She is the embodiment of rage. Despotter would be like most likely, paranoia or fear or whatever, which isn't technically a sin. Mammon, greed. He is the embodiment of greed 100%. I guess Belial and Fiona would technically share lust together with how they act. Even though Belial also is very much like a liar and a manipulator and intelligent, he technically doesn't have that same title like Baalzebul does. No. Baalzebul is the true Lord of the Lies, and he would be like slothness, I guess, because he also is like a slug and stuff too, I suppose. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Levistus would be sloth, because Levistus can't do shit. He's literally freaking... he is the epitome of like can't do shit. Glacia would be... What would she be? What are all the 7 deadly sins real quick? It's...
pride, lust, envy, gluttony, greed.
Pride, lust, envy, gluttony, greed, rage, or wrath,
and sloth.
So, like, I'm trying to wonder. Maybe would technically he be like the would Beelzebub be like sloth? I don't know.
No.
Envy.
I don't really think. Like, as much as they
represent
it, but to me it's just, I think they just more represent.
Maybe Despotter could maybe be sloth, maybe because he also like
because he's constantly
you're right,
doing something.
He is active.
I'm gonna say this. I don't think the people that talk about the 7 deadly sins is like the end all be all of how that works. It's not, doesn't really apply here to the same degree.
Not as much.
The devil, the archdukes and duchesses and all of them, they have their own kind of.
There are definitely aspects of all of them, like aspects,
but none of them fully embody it, except maybe Mammon.
Well, Mammon. It also does specifically say that like Mephistopheles is literally like an avatar of envy. It does specifically say that, and so it's like, okay, sure, all right, he's an avatar of envy.
He's envy,
but he's also very prideful too,
and he's hardworking. Like, the reality is usually the sins kind of carry this attitude of like,
you are just that
but,
thing,
but I'm not putting in the work to get there.
Well, it's usually, well, not necessarily. It's usually just the embodiment of that aspect, right? Lust would be like you're lustful, and so you're going to literally just be drowned in lust, right? You only care about that. You'll do anything and everything to have that all the time. Same thing for envy. You embody that. You're just envious all the time. Like you are, no matter what you have, even if you work to get something, even if you get that thing you were envious of before, it's like, oh, well, you're now envious of that person because you don't have that now.
Which
Same thing with like,
implies,
and that's what I mean. Like that. Technically speaking, Mephistopheles would be in a perfect embodiment of that. He would be envy. Same thing with like wrath, right? Zariel, no matter how many demons she kills, she's still angry. She is never not angry and wrathful. So I mean, some of them do embody the sins, I think, but not all of them to quite the same extent. But you know what? That in essence is the 8 layers, and we're finally, ladies and gentlemen, to the last deepest layer of the 9 hells, the 9th layer itself, known as Nesus. And it is ruled by the Archduke of Archdukes, the absolute, unabashed, uncontested supreme ruler of the 9 hells and all devil kind, Asmodeus himself. Sam, you want to go ahead and
I'm gonna start with some descriptors here.
Tell us a little bit about Nesus and Asmodeus.
Yeah, well, Nesus is a dark realm full of pits whose walls are beset with fortresses, where all of the pit fiend generals, obviously the ones loyal to Asmodeus, garrison their legions, and plot his never-ending conquest of everything in existence. In the middle of which is a rift with kind of an unending depth, where his great citadel, Malshim, kind of just towers out of. There is no, you can't see the bottom. It's wonderful. That's where the infernal court is.
Yep.
Kind of, it looks like a giant hollowed out stalagmite. So I mean, that's a cool image. It's also a prison, so souls that Asmodeus keeps there specifically.
His personally chosen.
Yeah.
You know.
Whether like for the reasons for those souls specifically are I think individual to each. Trying to convince him to release them is a very steep price. And he's traded them for such things as entire kingdoms before. So very valuable, very safe, kept secrets ostensibly. Asmodeus himself is a tall, bearded humanoid man with small horns. So very basic, aside from his piercing red eyes, but he doesn't look as
he's not nearly as grandiose as Mephistopheles likes to be.
Or as monstrous as some of the other archdukes and duchesses.
He's relatively simple in a lot of ways, but except for obviously his sheer force of presence.
Yeah, obviously he is free to change his form, as most powerful devils are. And he carries there's one thing you will always see him with, and it is a ruby-tipped scepter in hand.
Oh yeah, he never lets that thing go.
And there's a big reason for that. There is a long backstory of how
his ruby scepter came to be.
And I'll go over it quickly because I think it's important to his character.
Oh yeah, it's intrinsically tied to him and even the entirety of the 9 hells itself, even to a certain extent.
I have it written out I have it here. Where is it? All right. He's an unmatched strategist and orator, so he's good at speaking. He knows how to run things. I mean, that's
his whole thing. Literally.
In fact, like there is literally plays written about him as a being, which is weird because considering he is the unhopeful end of society for the material plane and the planes around it.
He's not the unhelpful end. In fact, he's in fact going to be the super helpful evolution of society, right?
In his eyes.
Yeah,
I mean,
in his eyes.
If you're on the material plane. But the kind of where he gets, how well he's known, and how like his, stand up kind of law background is the fact that he was He was accused of terrible crimes by the angels of law on Mount Celestia. Now, his response to that, being the smart person he is, ostensibly said, well, it's not fair if you do this, so let's talk to the,
we're going to Mechanus, I believe.
We're going to Mechanus. We're going to talk to Primus.
Talk to Primus.
He is the god of order.
He is the straight, perfect, neutral embodiment of neutrality.
Yeah, neutral order.
He is neutral in all things, just straight logic and facts.
And so he created a contract. The angels signed it. And what's funny is he dictated his actions. They were all by law. They were all agreed beforehand. He said, yes, we did sway mortals to evil, but we never breached contract. It always explained the terms clearly. So had they not obeyed the law doing that? Also, he blamed the mortal ambition as opposed to what he offered as the reasoning. He said, well, we just offered them something they were already looking for.
And they didn't have to take it. Nobody forced them. Nobody,
What makes it even better is he said, well, we used these souls to create devils to fight in the blood war against the demons, which, inevitably want to take you all down too.
Yeah, they want to absorb you. And you don't like demons, do you?
And this is chaos. This is pure chaos. Like, we don't like that either.
Yeah.
And so basically, he was a one-man show of basically putting out there, hey, we didn't really do anything wrong if you look at this through a neutral order perspective. Whereas the angels, where yes, they are of law and of good and what have you, but they were angry and rash and constantly more and more of them were trying to accuse him of these crimes. And Primus and the Mojans and all of the, of Mechanus were like, it basically got impatient with the whole scenario because it was like kind of a shit show. It was kind of a clown act where he was just very calm and collected and put things.
No, he literally ran circles around all of them.
He was calm, and all these angels and these wonderful beings were just brash and angry and weren't thinking it through. And it was constant, like, he did this, he did that, da da da. It was all emotion. And so
there was literally at one point, it got so heated. One of the angels attempted to actually attack him.
Yeah, not just any angel. Zariel.
Zariel did.
Pre Fiend days Zariel.
Who was still an angel or a celestial at that time.
But what ended up happening is because of all of this, Primus actually didn't necessarily weigh in his favor. But ostensibly definitive judgment is he rebuked the angels, so nothing really happened to them, but basically he was just like, I'm not going to punish him. And what he did instead was tell him, you have to carry this artifact, which is that ruby scepter we mentioned, and ostensibly is a artifact tier, old as they come item from Primus that ostensibly made it so Asmodeus has to follow law. That is the and that also extends to all of his subordinates. So the contract, the reason that the devils won't break contract is because of that artifact. Obviously, they already didn't do that, but this item is ostensibly is proof,
the ruby rod,
that they will never break contract.
There's also another kind of like second origin story potentially to the origins of the ruby rod itself. I believe it was also a thing where he, like, some theorize and believe that the ruby rod is actually a small sliver of the stone of ultimate evil.
Ooh.
Or hang on, what is it called? Is it the stone of ultimate evil, or the shard of pure / ultimate evil? That's what it's called. It, in essence, I believe, like, either Asmodeus or even Primus was like, he brought this specifically as a means of establishing true law and order. But it is also, like, believed that it is a piece, a small sliver of the shard of ultimate evil that has a very strong connection to the abyss, as well as the dark god Tharizdun.
Ooh, the Unchained.
The chained oblivion, indeed.
Yeah.
He again, not proven. That's why a lot of things about Asmodeus is super hard to confirm. And obviously a lot of this also is from edition to edition, like in real world, as well as like 4th edition that changed a lot of shit too. But that in essence is like another potential aspect of why the rod is so powerful. And also like they use it as a means of establishing his complete unquestioned rule. But please do continue, Sammy.
Yeah. The cool part about his kind of status within the hells and his station is that he doesn't have the same responsibilities as the other devils. So instead of getting has a quota for souls and stuff like that, no, he doesn't have to do that. So he spends his time ostensibly messing with other demigods and denizens of the 9 hells, even very powerful beings, to convince them to pledge their soul to him. So his daughter and Zariel, and there's many other beings conceivably that you could just place in his castle of sorts that used to be other things. Archfey, Yugoloths, all these different like powerful beings.
He has Tiamat.
Yeah. And now some of those creatures obviously still have a semblance of themselves, but some of them would morph into something completely different. And so that's how
they
powerful
still
he
made
is.
deals with him.
Yeah. It's most like it's believed that Zariel and Glacia are both, they're both beings from somewhere else that were turned into devils by him alone. The other lords of the night, they don't have that power to that degree. They are very powerful beings who could probably really mess shit up, but his powers is unmatched in a lot of senses because of how,
he has complete total domination and control over everything that is the 9 hells or resides in the 9 hells.
And the funny thing is like it's because he's just capable. He doesn't let things go over his head. And as arrogant as he is, anyone else as arrogant as him would have lost the throne millennia ago.
Again, he's arrogant specifically because he can be, right? Because he knows how intelligent and capable he is, right? Yeah. He's not, but unlike, for instance, like Mephistopheles, right? Who his pride primarily gets in the way of him truly being able to rise maybe even higher. Asmodeus doesn't really let that happen as much. He doesn't really care about pride nearly as much. As long as you do your job, as long as you get shit done, you can say, do just about whatever the hell you want, as long as you do the things you're supposed to do and you do it the way that I told you to do it. Like, he's the one that's like, I set what you're supposed to do and you do it that way. All right, that's fine. You can go, sleep with your father, brother, son, uncle, cousin, whatever. I don't care. do your thing. You want to go in and attempt to usurp me or whatever. You want to try and convince the others that you're better. Whatever. That's fine. Do that. Just don't screw with the bureaucracy. Don't forge documents. Keep things honest and real. Okay. Yeah. You want to lie in order to try and whatever, but you are at the very least on paper, you're honest. If you're honest on paper, you can say whatever you want. Yeah. I don't care.
And that's the reality is so because he's at where he's at and because he's as powerful as he is, his goals and grand ambitions are completely different. He wants to rule the cosmos, not out of a sense of hatred, not out of a sense of wanting to destroy.
There's a little bit of hatred, but
yes,
not
but it's almost in a different way because
he hates the chaos.
Yeah,
he hates the chaotic nature of it. Yeah. He hates how people are allowed to just do things that inadvertently hurt themselves or other people, or other things. He's like, that's stupid. Yeah. Why? You should not be allowed to do that. That's dumb, and you make mistakes. So it'd be the fact that you make mistakes, I'm going to stop that because that's stupid.
So his whole idea is that the universe under his watch, his control alone, would be a pristine utopia within the infernal hierarchy. If everyone was a part of it,
that's it.
That would be it.
It would be perfection.
There would be no
perfection.
wars. Everybody would have a purpose. Now, some would say that argument is unfair because some purposes are worse than others, but to him, that's not the issue.
It doesn't matter. Everybody serves a purpose, and every purpose in that sense is necessary, and you should be okay with that, and you should be fit with that, and that's fine.
And the reason he kind of looks at the good aligned peoples as a problem is he finds them sentimental, delicate,
it's weak,
soft.
You know, he feels they allow chaos to perpetuate, right? Because again, you have to remember, he isn't neutral lawful, right? He's not lawful evil. Neutral. He's evil. So there is a sense of hatred that comes along with it, where he's like, these people who do bad things need to be punished. They need to be punished for the things that they have done, because they've done horrendous things, and they've done it for selfish reasons, and they need to learn through pain, and they need to learn through suffering, and that will give them perspective.
Even people who do good their whole lives, if he doesn't think they've done enough, if he thinks they're too soft and they couldn't get what really, or even if they did like
one bad thing, he's like, you should be punished for that bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I think he, to him, not being harsh and steadfast and being soft and delicate and emotional, that is a punishable offense. Even if you do good things your whole life,
because you could have done better.
Yeah. You could have done better if you stopped at the source and took it out and did what had to be done. But to him, that's a punishable offense. And so, albeit he believes that he was put there in existence to do that. And
100% he believes it.
In kind of in a Thanos situation, with if you want to go back to Marvel, you could make an argument that some of the things he believes in are just. He's not good, but justifiable.
He's not wrong in a sense, right? That's what it is. It's like he's not necessarily wrong in his beliefs and in how he kind of like, it's more so his methods and how he goes about it that isn't great. And because exactly like Sam said, he's evil, meaning he does things maybe to an extreme extent, right? He's like, hey, you allowed this thing to happen, or you didn't deal with it like you should have, and so you should be punished for that too. And the irony of it is, though, is he's also like fair so long as you establish the rules of what is fair, right? He's fair in the sense that it's like, he's not really going to do something to you overtly unless you break a contract or earned it. Unless you like did something that is really benefiting of punishment, he's still lawful, and he still has to maintain a very specific code of conduct and interaction at all times. And he also expects that of all of his devils under him,
from highest to lowest.
Doesn't matter to Mephistopheles, to a lemur, to the lowest.
Everyone is supposed to have
follow
the exact same
rules.
Morals.
You follow the rules,
which is crazy, because when you think about that, it puts it in a completely different light. You can't convince a devil to go back on a contract like that, because what that does is that they know what's going to happen to them.
They can't do it.
And in my mind, the way that they're created and the fact that they become devils, I feel like it's kind of like a monarch butterflies thing. They're born knowing where to migrate. These devils come into existence knowing what's going to happen to them.
Oh, intrinsically, it is tied to their innate being,
existence.
Right?
And so for him, his thought process is, if I make everyone into one, and everyone follows this hierarchy.
I mean, that's if he can control everybody, he can control all devils.
He is powerful enough to literally control every plane put together if it was all part of the infernal hierarchy.
If he could get everybody the rod, and again, that's the power of law, right? Because it's all under the specific set of rules and regulations. Think of it almost like the Matrix, right? The Matrix, like the system has overt control over just about anybody who maintains inside the system. And anybody outside that system, though, has the potential to do all kinds of ridiculous, crazy things that the system believes that they shouldn't be able to do. They can fly, they can jump, they can move faster, they can dodge bullets, they can whatever. It's like, if Asmodeus can successfully convert all of at least the material realm or any other realm of chaos, that in his eyes would make the world, the overarching realms, a better place. It would make it perfect. And that is his overall goal and desire. He thinks that the vast cosmos, at least all the realms that represent, that aren't lawful, true neutral even, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil, chaotic good, all of that, even true neutral, like whatever. If it's not lawful in any way, shape, or form, it needs to be converted to the infernal hierarchy to then be set in place and how it should be, to have it set correctly. Some people even believe he might not be satisfied with even that. He might go and start trying to surpass even the lawful good, lawful neutral areas and planes of existence, simply because he feels the fact that they are neutral or good, they do not enforce law like they should. They don't enforce the law like it needs to be enforced, and therefore they still leave room for chaos, and they also need to be brought to heel to be controlled correctly and directed correctly. That is, he's a, and for that reason, he's a great villain, right? He's a phenomenal villain for that reason, is that he's not intrinsically or overtly wrong necessarily, but it's a lot of has to do with his methods and the issues that prop up. He has so much room for interpretation and some grayness, right? And ambiguity in certain aspects of what's going on. His methods are absolutely horrendous. Like he is not a good person by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. I mean, but he's not supposed to be. And like, I think that's the...
But he's also not just essentially like, he's not like, unlike demons, he's not also just looking to destroy or kill for no reason, right? Like, he will torture for a reason, though. He will torture, he will enslave, he will subjugate. But he's also like, hey, this is for your own good. All the things you complain about, all the things that you say that you hate about life or whatever, I can make that better. Yeah. And he intends to.
But he fully believes it. I think
he believes it. No, that's what I'm saying. He fully believes it. It's not a lie. It's not a joke or a delusion. He 100% believes it. And the thing being is he's also not entirely wrong about that either, right? He is exceedingly capable. He's one of the most capable beings in the vast omniverse. He just is. And so that's the problem. It's like you can't necessarily just straight up disagree with him either. You can't necessarily agree with him because he hasn't done it yet, but you also can't just straight up disagree with him either. And that's, again, what makes him and devils as a whole such incredible, amazing creatures to utilize in a campaign. We don't really have many stat blocks at all for these guys, but you know what? I'll go ahead. Let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about some of them that we have. Like, we've got Zariel, which would probably be the best one to reference, and like Bel as well as Bale, because they're part of like, the Blood War. And so we do have, and part of the whole module Descent into Avernus. And so we do have stat blocks for them. We also have stat blocks for Garyon, interestingly enough.
There's like a couple.
So let's look at some of these stat blocks real quick, just for these archdevils, and that can give you guys kind of an idea of where their power level is at, right? So let's start with Zariel, because she's
which version?
There are so many, but we're gonna do Archduchess of Zariel.
Archduke.
Yeah, Archduke Zariel.
Oh, that was something I was going to mention earlier. The whole our gendering of them is completely interchangeable.
Yeah,
because they don't have a
gender doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Greek gods, which they can do whatever they want with it.
It's more so just what like their preference, really, right? Like, or they usually
what they originally formed as, but they can easily.
It's like for instance, again, Glacia, she usually prefers to come in the guise of a feminine figure. Same thing with Fierna. Asmodeus usually presents as more male in form. Same thing with Mephistopheles. They do seem to have a bit of their preferences for how they like to kind of present themselves, but gender means absolutely nothing to them because they can shift themselves as much as they want. Specifically, anyway, the archdevils. Other devils kind of are stuck in a specific form, and they don't really have one gender over the other for the most part, except for like Arinyas or whatever.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about Archduke Zariel of Avernus. Her stat block, she is a large fiend, devil, lawful evil, with an armor class of 21, hit points of 580, with a speed of 50 feet walking and 150 feet flying. That is bonkers. She is, to be fair, the layers don't necessarily automatically attribute to a devil's power. We talked about that, right? Archdukes, they're not necessarily all about, like, the lower layer, the automatically more powerful they are. That's not entirely true. At least it depends on how you view power, right? It's not just straight strength. The deeper layers you are, it's not always about that. So, but she is.
But if you're the Archduke, Archduchess of a war-torn Avernus, constantly fighting in the blood war,
you are exceedingly powerful. So, and again, think about this compared to the strongest demon, Demogorgon.
Oh, it's not even close.
Her AC is around the same, but her hit points are like 130 higher than him, and her speed is astronomical. She can fly, she can do all this stuff. Her stats, she's got a 27 in strength, a 24 in dex, a 28 in con, a 26 in intelligence, a 27 in wisdom, and a 30 in charisma. That's just like, she's got nothing below a 24. That's just utterly insane. She's got resistances to fire, radiant, and bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage from attacks that aren't silvered or not magical. So she's resistant to both fire and radiant. And that's going to come into another interesting thing in a second. She's got immunity to cold, necrotic, and poison damage. She's immune to charmed, exhaustion, frightened, and poison. She has dark vision to 120 feet and telepathy and language of all, basically.
So just to remind everyone, if you were to pit any of the princes of the abyss up against, they would not win.
No, not even close.
Most of the damage types they do, most of the conditions they apply, they wouldn't be able to keep up. They wouldn't be able to get to her. No. And it's the reality is that her whole embodiment is war and wrath and anger. And so she is quite possibly one of the most dangerous entities.
Oh, she absolutely
you even compare her to like the avatar of Bahamut or Tiamat. And like she
can contend with them potentially,
like, more than contend in some instances.
Like, I don't know if she'd really be able to defeat them necessarily.
Not so much Tiamat, only because of the fire, but
even with Bahamut and some of his like other abilities and stuff, because he also has like force abilities and shit like that too. Yeah. So like, I don't think she could necessarily defeat the avatars by herself, but she can still contend with them. It's not it's not just like a foregone conclusion that they'll win, and that's in and of itself is crazy.
She's also probably strong enough to defeat multiple lesser deities as well.
Oh, or again, at least contend with them. Like their avatars, like a lesser deity's avatar, she is on a similar level. It's not guaranteed that they could defeat her.
Or even, I mean, more of some of the lesser deities that are stuck in a plane, not necessarily in
that's true too. Yeah,
as an avatar, but actually their physical form. She could probably kill them.
So let's keep going a little bit with that too. She also has Devil Sight as an ability, which allows her to see through both magical and non-magical darkness. She has fiery weapons. Zariel's weapon attacks are magical, and when she hits with any weapon, the weapon deals an extra 8d8 fire damage, included in the weapon's attacks below. So this is already included in the thing, but that's an extra 8d8 fire damage for any attack, any weapon she uses. She has innate spell casting with a spell save DC of 26. She can cast Alter Self at will, detect evil and good, fireball, invisibility, and wall of fire at will with a save of 26. 3 times a day each. You can also cast Blade Barrier, Dispel Evil and Good, and Finger of Death with a save of 26. She's got magic resistance, 3 legendary resistances, and regeneration. Zariel regains 20 hit points at the start of her turn. Unless she takes radiant damage, this trait will continue, and she can only die if she starts her turn with 0 hit points and doesn't regenerate. So unless she's resistant to radiant damage, but she will continue to regenerate unless you deal radiant damage.
Which is super cool because most, like, unless you do research, most people won't realize that. Because they'll hit her with radiant and then they'll be like, oh, she takes half. And they'll be like, oh, I'm not going to use that again.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to use radiant damage. And then it'll be like, oh, she won't heal. But then it'll be like, oh, but the next turn, she heals 20 hit points or whatever.
If they don't do it again. So
and it's like, you're like, wait a minute, did she heal last time? And you're like, man, roll a history check. Do you remember? Like,
well, I'm not that bad.
No, I would be like, I'll be like, no, she didn't heal last time. It's like, okay, well, how did she heal?
They're gonna try to put 2 and 2 together.
They might try to figure it out, but it will be like, you're not gonna necessarily know that right off the cuff. She's got multi-attack. She attacks twice with her flail and once with the hammer Metallotalk. She can substitute Horrid Touch for Metallotalk.
Yeah, so if she recharges it.
Yeah, her flail is a +16 to hit, a reach of 10 feet, and on a hit will deal 2d8 plus 8 piercing damage, and then the 8d8 fire damage on top of that, with an average damage output of being 53 damage. That's just the average amount of damage that she can do. Now, after that, again, she's going to do it. She can attack with her flail twice. And then her third attack is with Metallotalk, which literally, when used, it's a attack of +16 to hit with a reach of 10 feet. And on a hit, the target will take 2d8 bludgeoning damage or 2d10 bludgeoning damage if she uses 2 hands.
That's if you get the flail out of her hand.
Yeah, if you specifically, well, her flail is like technically part of her hand too, I think. So she can like just shift it and then like turn it into this if she wants.
That's a weird one because I don't see why you'd get that in it.
Yeah, either way. Plus the 8d8 fire damage. However, in addition, the weapon emits a burst of cold that deals 3d6 damage to any creature within 30 feet of it except for the wielder. Because she's immune to cold damage because of it.
Which is hilarious. Because that means it's an unsavable effect.
Yeah, no, it just happens. You don't save from that. Anytime she hits with this weapon, it'll just emit 3d6 cold damage to each creature within 30 feet of the spot she hit. And every creature, they'll just take that damage. There's no save.
Hey, do it. Horrid Touch. Oh, no.
Yeah, she can also teleport as an action. Within 120 feet to any area that she wants.
Which is weird because I guess if you really needed to dash, but she can fly at 150 feet.
Yeah.
So unless she can only teleport because like there's something blocking her or...
Yeah, so there might be something blocking her movement. Like if she's in like, say, a wall of force or a force cage, she could teleport out of that as an action. She'd have to make a check, but she could probably get past it and then teleport out as an action. She also has, which is one of her most powerful abilities, and it recharges on a 5 to 6 Horrid Touch.
Ooh.
Zariel touches one creature within 10 feet of her, and the target must succeed on a DC 26 con save or take 8d10 necrotic damage and be poisoned for 1 minute. While poisoned in this way, the target is also blinded and deafened. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, and ending the effect on itself as a success. Yeah, got tongue-tied there for a moment. But that's freaking crazy. And she can do that as part of her attack action with her flails. She can attack you twice with her flail, and then instead of attack with Metallotalk, attack with the Horrid Touch. That's dumb. That's so ridiculous.
What kills me is it's a recharge, but the other thing that she can do if it doesn't recharge is still really good.
Yeah.
So
Metallotalk still destroys.
And to be fair, this is a version of Zariel that has Metallotalk. There is a version that doesn't have it because
this is kind of her like ultimate version.
This is the newest edition, a newest iteration of her. She recently killed a demon lord and took the hammer. So if you want to play without the hammer, say that demon lord's still alive in your story or whatever, because obviously she killed that demon lord and took the hammer, and we know when these things die, they go back to the abyss with their equipment. So she must have actually killed him.
there is a stat block for him as well. But the reality is, if you want to do it without that, you can. You would just attack 3 times with the flail, and substitute one of them out for the horrid touch. And so, I mean, but that's insane. Even if you don't get your recharge, you are still putting out a ridiculous amount of damage to possibly the entire party.
And she has so much resistance and immunity and health. She's got a redonkulous health and a not low AC on top of that.
And you missed one final thing.
Oh no, I didn't. I was getting there. She's got legendary actions, as you would obviously expect. 3 that she can take.
2.
With a cost. Well, no, she's got 3 total, but with a cost of 2 of these actions, she can utilize her immolating gaze. Zariel turns her magical gaze toward one creature she can see within 120 feet of her and commands it to combust. The target must succeed on a DC 26 wisdom save or take 4d10 fire damage. So to be fair, she can only do that once a round.
Yeah.
But that's still extra damage. That's not even on her turn.
And the best part is that the only other legendary action she has is teleport, which means she will do both of them every round because it's free action. It's a legendary action. She has no other.
If you're lucky enough to make the save, you don't take any damage. It's not a half.
It's save or suck.
It's save or suck. And so there is at least that. There's at least that chance.
Let's say on average, we'll use average numbers for this. She attacks one person. She goes for one person this round.
Yep.
She will hit you for the 50. What is it? 53.
So we'll go to 2 attacks with the flail. So that's specifically going to be 53 damage
twice
on average. That's just the average damage.
2 times. So that's 106 damage. If she hits you with Metallic, that's going to be another.
And we'll say one-handed. We'll do one hand.
We'll do one-handed because that makes sense.
It's going to be another. So it's 17. It'll be another 53 points of damage on top of. You're going to take 10 points of cold. So that's going to be 63 points of damage. So that's going to be 169 points of damage.
Nice.
She does on average, and just attacking, 169 points of damage.
Okay, so she hits all of her attacks. If she hits you with then the gaze after, that's another 22. So that's 191 damage a turn on average that she's going to get. Because no offense, a 26 wisdom check is hard to meet.
It's almost impossible that you're gonna.
And what she'll do is she's smart. Why wouldn't she focus the fighter
or
the barbarian
or the cleric who's gonna heal everybody?
My thing is, if I'm gonna focus the cleric,
do radiant damage.
I'm not gonna focus the cleric with the burning gaze, but I for sure am gonna get up in their face and kill them with the horrid touch. Yeah, because I'm gonna blind them because you have to see people to heal them. So I'm gonna blind you and I'm gonna beat the crap out of you. So the reality is. Unless you a wizard would be dead in one turn, most likely.
There's almost unless you have ungodly AC or you're able to somehow
reduce damage or
get away from her. Because the problem is she has 150 foot of fly speed,
and she can teleport every round another 120 feet.
You can't again on her turn it's almost impossible for you to get away from her unless you seal her in something. Yeah. And then even then she can still try to get out of it and she can't attack you, but still it's this in essence is just the perfect representation of the power of devils, right?
Yeah.
She is a great representation. Some of them might be slightly less powerful and maybe even slightly more powerful than she is overall. But this is a great, I think, average base to showcase the absolute overwhelming power of devils themselves. Yeah, dude, I don't really think that there's anything else we can really say here. No. We do have to kind of be getting going actually at this point too. But you know what, y'all? Go ahead.
Unfortunately there aren't more
there aren't a lot more
stat blocks,
at least not in 5e specifically. Well, we could probably find some older ones if we wanted to.
For the sake of for what they have, they do have a couple of the disgraced demon lords or devil archduke, whatever archdukes.
Yes, they got Garyon, they got Bale, those are still, they aren't archdukes, but they are dukes now. And so
they got Moloch and Hittijin.
Which one?
Hutijin?
Let me see real quick. Where's the
Hutijin?
Yeah, Hutijin or Hutijin. Hutijin
Hutijin.
I believe. Yeah.
So
Hutijin.
these are, still very powerful, more powerful than like a pit fiend or whatever. But they're really, it's just gonna be pit fiends as your end game.
Yeah, pit fiends are usually also like, but for archdevils,
there's not a lot.
And to be fair, that particular Zariel is augmented a bit more. So that's technically at her at like with other things that have happened to bolster her ability even more.
But even the other versions
even
of
the
her.
normal version of her is still like the normal version of her, 420 hit points, 150-foot fly speed, 50-foot walking speed. All of her stats are the same. Her resistances are the same. The only difference is that she gets a bit more hit points. And she has MetaTalks instead of like a long sword. And her long sword,
still does the extra damage.
Except for the ice. The only thing is MetaTalks does like the extra ice damage with the hit.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, it's all the same. And so like she gets a little bit more health. So she's still that dangerous.
Yeah.
Even without MetaTalks.
You could probably look online. You could probably find some old stat blocks.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
For these archdukes.
For the other archdevils, yeah.
And you might be able to port that in yourself or look online. There might be people who have already done that work for you. I haven't looked before because I don't really want to send a group of adventurers to fight an archdevil, only because I'm not confident in that I could tell that story and it would actually be fun.
I'm super interested in maybe running like a devil campaign or something.
But like the rest of the devil array of monsters is a fun read through. It's something that I've done many times, and
they're so cool. They're so fun.
And the reality is that because they're in different layers and they're in different groups and castes and sects, it's fun to kind of throw different ones at a party and see what sticks.
And see what happens. Because again, you can interact with them and they're all so different, but they all still have one thing in common, and that they are willing to interact, make deals, contracts, to beguile the party or somehow to a certain extent, unless they prove themselves to be just a straight up threat to them,
or make a contract with someone else and fight the party because of that.
Exactly.
Which is another fun thing to do. But
that in essence is the intrinsic difference between devils and demons. We might come back again with maybe a little bit more about their specific conflict known as the Blood War. Which is a really sweet and juicy bit of lore and stuff there that you can also maybe add to your campaign a little bit to have maybe like a little, like, not separate, but like isolated influences from it, right? Where you're like, hey, you're having some one group of devils contending with some demons, and because of that, it's causing all kinds of other shit that's happening. Like the Blood War is bleeding into the material plane.
That'd be cool,
right? That would be dope. And so again, something to think about and consider. But it's important that if you do that, you need to be able to showcase the distinct differences between demons and devils. Even though there are some similarities, but there are very specific, distinct differences.
And if we talk about that, we might also touch on the different cults and ways that it impacts the material plane. We did touch on that with the demons, but the devils are definitely keep more to themselves.
The devils have a more, like, I would say, dedicated cult base as well, due to that, specifically from their willingness and even intentional active progress of trying to create contracts and stuff like that. But you know what? That in essence is our take on D&D 5th edition Devils. Thank you guys so much if you stuck with us for this long. We appreciate it. Once again, please do like the video, comment on it if you have any ideas or thoughts or some experiences that you guys had in your games with devils and how much you like them. Do please subscribe if you haven't already. Share the video as always. We appreciate all that good stuff. Once more, thank you. And we will see you guys once again when we dive back down into the archive. Have a great one, y'all.